Chapter 920. Hijichu's legal letter to the verified account was terminated because of his sudden death. After the police investigation, they determined that it was a traffic accident. The bus driver was responsible, but the verified account himself was also partly to blame for crossing the road. Therefore, in the end, the matter was left unsettled. Ishihara Taro returned to his apartment with a faint smile on his handsome face. He had just turned 18 this year, which was 1 year younger than Gunyenji. However, he had already graduated with a master's degree and started studying for a PhD in chaos mathematics. No matter what, his academic qualifications were always higher than Gunyenji's. Turning on his computer, he saw that Tashihara had sent him another person's information. This was his second chance and he could only succeed. He could not fail. The second person was Gu Yenran's biological father, who was still in a vegetative state on the hospital bed. It was both easy and difficult to make a vegetative person die of natural causes. If it was easy, the vegetative person would definitely die of natural causes if he was in their hands. However, the vegetative person was now in a Wuxia Empire hospital, and according to their observations, there were people secretly monitoring him. If they really sent people to kill this person, they would be walking into a trap. Ishihara Taro thought for a long time and decided to open his program to calculate all kinds of possibilities. The chaos algorithm he designed could include all kinds of seemingly random events, then calculate the probability of these random events becoming related events, and finally find the best way to achieve his goal. For example, the first chance he wanted to achieve was to make the verified account die of natural causes. Finally, the sequence of events derived from his algorithm was successfully completed. Now he needed to calculate which events had the highest probability of happening and which combinations of events could achieve his ultimate goal. Gu Yenran's father was now in a vegetative state, but no one knew when he would wake up. Although this person's position was not very important, what if he woke up and spoke nonsense? It was better for him to die of natural causes. He spent 2 sleepless days calculating in his apartment before he found the best combination of events. If these events could happen, of course he would need his butterfly wings. Ishihara Taro played with the coin in his hand, and a glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. After Christmas, it was soon New Year's Day. New Year's Day was a holiday celebrated by the entire Blue Planet, and the Wuxia Empire was no exception. On the morning of December 31st, the sky was gray and looked like it was going to snow. This year's winter in the capital was not too cold. There were small snowflakes, but there had not been any heavy snowfall. However, judging from the weather today, it was probably going to snow. As soon as they arrived at work, everyone became absent-minded and waited for a long vacation. In an ordinary hospital on the 4th ring road of the imperial capital, the doctors and nurses at work were in a good mood because the holidays were coming soon. After breakfast, doctors and interns began to do. He checked the rooms one by one and asked the patients one by one. Perhaps because it was the New Year's Day. The doctor was pleasant, the patient was polite, and the relationship between doctors and nurses was harmonious and loving. Gu Yenran's comatose father had been transferred to this hospital for a while. Gu and intern Ran had asked. Gu was Gu Dr. Gu. Of course, the hospital could not make the decision. If the Special Operations Forces did not say anything, they would not dare to pull it out. But he didn't take care of her much. When they arrived at the vegetative ward where Gu Yenran's father was, the doctor frowned in disgust and said to the interns, "This patient has been in a vegetative state for 7 years and is about to enter his 8th year. You can take a look at him when you have time. It will help you understand vegetative patients." The interns looked at each other and nodded. Since it was almost New Year's Day, many people came to the hospital. In the hallway, a few teenagers were playing with each other. They pushed and shoved each other, but it was not intense. They were just playing with each other, so no one paid attention. They were tired and their hands were itchy. They wanted to smoke, but this was a hospital. They did not dare to. They could only endure it. A nurse pushed a surgery cart from the other end of the hallway. She was wearing a white gown and a nurse's cap. She walked slowly. She was going to the operating room at the other end of the hallway to prepare for the next surgery. At this moment, a golden coin rolled over from nowhere. It was just a coin. It would not have caused any trouble for the cart, but it was too shiny. But the coin was too shiny. As soon as it rolled over, the nurse lowered her eyes and a golden light flashed in front of her eyes. She was stunned and lost her footing, falling to the side. The surgical cart crashed into a teenager who was standing at the side. The teenager, who had been tortured by his addiction, immediately glared and kicked the cart over. The nurse was furious. She shouted, "What are you doing? This cart is prepared for surgery. You kicked it over. What about the surgery? I don't care what you're going to do. The teenager pushed the nurse impatiently, pushing her into Gu Xiangwen's ward. What happened? The doctor who was doing his rounds turned around and asked. The nurse immediately told him what had happened. In the end, she said pitifully, I just told them to be careful, but look at them. The doctor was also impatient. He said to the teenagers, this is a hospital. Stop causing trouble. Go back to where you came from. Go back? You hurt our comrade's waist. Who's going to pay for it? A taller teenager spat in disdain. Do you dare? You're talking nonsense. How heavy can a surgery cart be? And hurt his waist. Don't tell me you're pretending. The sharp-tongued nurse immediately retorted. Pretending? Come on, take off your clothes and let this nurse have a look. The tall youth commanded his companion, commanding him in a very proper manner. The doctor was stunned. He was about to stop them when he saw one of the teenagers take off his shirt and pants. He was only wearing shorts in the ward. Put them on. What are you doing? The doctor felt that it was an eyesore. He quickly turned around and scolded them. Unexpectedly, none of the teenagers were willing to give in. Once they heard the doctor scolding them like a parent, they became furious. In the end, they didn't know who started the fight. In short, everyone was fighting. The equipment and power supply in the ward were damaged. The boys protected the girls. The doctor protected the students. They were all fighting with a group of gangsters. Of course, they couldn't beat this group of teenagers who were experienced in street fights. Soon, the lights in the ward flickered twice. They went out and lit up again. Only then did everyone stop. The surveillance equipment in the ward captured the scene of everyone fighting. No one knew when the nasal feeding tube on the vegetative patient on the hospital bed fell. Without the nasal feeding tube, the equipment was all over the place. Some of the equipment already had problems and they had to call someone to fix it. When the light bulb was changed and the ward saw light again, the doctor who was doing the rounds realized that the vegetative patient on the hospital bed had stopped breathing. This is the second monthly vote of 4,500 plus updates. Today's third update is asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. P.S. It's almost the end of the month. If you can still cast your monthly votes, hurry up and vote. If you've already cast 5 votes, moi. At 7 p.m., the third update. Chapter 921. On the night of December 31st, Hua Xiaoheng received news that the person in a vegetative state that they had purposely placed in the general hospital as bait had just passed away. The hospital's report clearly stated that he had died of organ failure. He had been in a vegetative state for many years and would have died long ago if he hadn't been constantly nourished with medicine and equipment. Now he had only died of normal organ failure. Of course, the hospital had also written a detailed account of what had happened during the day in the report and stated that it was indeed their responsibility. They had already punished the doctor who had been on duty and the nurse who had pushed the surgical cart. Hua Xiaoheng frowned and looked at it for a long time before calling back the Special Operations Forces members who had been monitoring the hospital. What's going on with Gu Yanran's father? Hua Xiaoheng stared at the Special Operations Forces member in front of him. As he listened to him speak, he observed his attitude. This was also a way to determine whether he was telling the truth or not. The member said with a bitter expression, "We've always had people watching over there, even this morning. But a group of teenagers suddenly started fighting outside the ward because of a surgical cart. We were also caught off guard. When they had wanted to rush in, they discovered that the ward had already been blacked out. The person's life was maintained by all kinds of equipment. As soon as the power went out and the equipment stopped working, his organs began to fail and he quickly passed away." Teenagers. Hua Xiaoheng's frown deepened. "Get someone to investigate the background of these teenagers." He paused and said, "Get the information from the police headquarters first. They might have it." As soon as he heard the description, he felt that these teenagers were the kind of problematic teenagers who constantly made mistakes and entered the police station as if they were in their own bedroom. "Yes, Chief." Because of this sudden incident, Hua Xiaoheng worked overtime from the day before New Year's until the first day of the new year. He stood up from behind his desk, walked to the window and lit a cigarette. Taking a deep breath, the spicy smell of tobacco instantly cleared his mind. From the video footage he had seen today, everything was a coincidence. The leader of the teenagers had come with his family to visit the patient, and the other teenagers had come with him. At that time the fight was also a mess. The interns that the doctor on duty had brought along were all men. They were hot-blooded and couldn't stand being bullied. Seeing the young nurse being bullied, they all rolled up their sleeves and joined in. As for Gu Yanran's father, he was the fish in the moat that was caught in the crossfire. He couldn't see any human factors. But as Gu Yinran's father, Hua Xiaoheng refused to believe that everything was a coincidence. He had already laid out an inescapable net. No matter who it was, they would not be able to escape his trap. But he hadn't expected that no one would actually do it. If it was a coincidence, then they could only blame their bad luck. If it wasn't a coincidence, then the mastermind behind this must be extraordinarily powerful. It was done cleanly and flawless. Not to mention suing him, even the police didn't have any evidence to file a case. Ishihara Taro, who was wearing a black double-breasted uniform, walked into the courtyard of the Yu Mountain Villa district once again. This time, his face was not as anxious and fearful as the last time. Instead, it was filled with confidence. His two successes gave him greatly of that of and success of Cheng. His followers were all itching to put him on a shrine. Young Master Taro is here. A middle-aged woman dressed in a sakura kimono opened the door and let Ishihara Taro in. Master. Young the young. The middle-aged woman nodded. We were waiting for you. Ishihara Taro nodded and walked in respectfully. Standing in front of his grandfather once again, Ishihara Taro suddenly realized that his grandfather was too old. After not seeing him for a few days, his eyes, which used to be bright and full of spirit, were now turbid and listless. Grandfather, did you not sleep well last night? Ishihara Taro knelt down beside the old man and naturally helped him brew tea. The old man nodded. The mountain wind was very strong yesterday. I was worried that it would snow today, but it hasn't yet. I've been thinking about it. Ishihara Taro smiled and poured a cup of tea for the old man. He raised his hands above his head and said, Please have a taste. The old man took the frozen stone teacup and took a sip with a smile. Putting down the teacup, the old man patted Ishihara Taro's head. You are a promising young man, a promising young man. I finally felt relieved. Taro, you're better than your father. Ishihara Taro felt that his hard work over the past few years had not gone to waste after receiving such a compliment from his grandfather. I have to thank grandfather for giving me 2 more chances. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to successfully prove my algorithm. Success gave him confidence and courage. He was no longer the same frustrated and depressed young man from last time. This is the result of your own hard work. The old man retracted his hand and got to the point. Since you've already succeeded twice, have you ever thought of doing something serious? The so-called serious matter was to deal with Gunyenji. Gunyenji had hired a lawyer from the largest law firm in the United States to help her fight the lawsuit in the Japanese court. One had to admit that this move was really vicious. Japanese judges were not even afraid of their own country's politicians, but they were afraid of Americans. It could be said that the Japanese's obedience to Americans was engraved in their bones. Under the pressure of the American lawyer, the Japanese court was about to announce the verdict. Once the other party was declared to be the winner, they would have no choice but to return the $15 billion that Gu Yenran had donated. Gunyenji also requested for the return of the profits that the foundation had earned from the $15 billion over the past 7 years, including but not limited to interest, dividends, investment returns, and so on. That was the worst part. They were not giving them a way out at all. Ishihara Taro nodded solemnly. I'm already planning, but there are too many uncertain factors around Gunyenji. I haven't found the best solution yet. Please wait patiently, grandfather. When the old man heard the words, wait patiently, he was so angry that he started coughing violently. Ishihara Taro quickly massaged the old man's back to calm him down. Grandfather, is the matter very urgent? Ishihara Taro could see that the old man's emotions were not too stable. The old man did not want Ishihara Taro to know too much because it would bring him unnecessary pressure. But he had to say it now. Taro, do you know that Gunyenji is fighting a lawsuit against us in Japan? Ishihara Taro nodded with a gloomy expression. She won't win. How can we take back the money that we've given away? She can take it back and she will definitely win. The old man looked at Ishihara Taro with a complicated expression. So you have to plan for the worst and find the best solution as soon as possible. If Ishihara Taro wanted to find the best algorithm, he would need sufficient information. In the first opportunity, he was able to successfully make the verified account die in a car accident, because he had collected a lot of information, including information on everyone in the area where the verified account lived. That was how he was able to discover the old lady who often went out for a walk at certain times, as well as the bus stop, and where the verified account's car was parked. And in the second opportunity, he obtained even more information. Because Gu Yenran's comatose father was also someone they had been secretly watching. That was how he was able to know the habits and personality traits of the doctors, interns and nurses in that hospital like the back of his hand. They also had information on the patients and their family members in the hospital in their hands. This was the only way for his algorithm to work. But what about Gunyenji? There was simply too little information on her. This is the third monthly vote. Today I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. P.S. It's almost the end of the month. If you can still cast your monthly votes, please do so quickly. If you've already cast 5 votes, moi. Chapter 922. It was New Year's Day, a new year, a new day. Gunyenji woke up in her dorm room but still didn't want to open her eyes. The room was quiet. Machichi had gone home to celebrate New Year's with her family. In order to graduate early, she had crazily taken classes and had at least 3 times more homework than Machichi. Graduate students mostly had to write theses. She entered school half a year later than her peers and had to graduate a year and a half earlier than others, so she only had 1 year to study. She had to pay a higher price to finish what others took 3 years to complete in 1 year. But it was all worth it. If everything went smoothly, she would be able to graduate after the final exams this winter. But before that, she had to finish the first draft of her graduation thesis and show it to Hijichu. Then she had to find a thesis defense teacher before the final exams. Only then would she be able to graduate. Counting on her fingers, she realized there weren't many days left. This year's New Year was in early February. The first day of the new year happened to be February 14th, which was Valentine's Day in the West. Festivals are all clumped together. I feel like my body is being hollowed out. Gunyenji sighed deeply and finally rubbed her eyes before sitting up in bed. She looked around groggily before picking up the phone on the bedside table to check it was already 10 in the morning. Gunyenji put the pillow on top of the bed and leaned back to pick up her phone to start her daily routine. She went on social media, checked the news, texted, and checked the progress of the cases she was following. When Hua Xiaoheng's call came in, Gunyenji switched back to her phone mode and said, "Hi." Hua Xiaoheng didn't go back to sleep after working all night. Instead, he went for a run before showering and eating breakfast. He only called Gunyenji when he saw that it was past 10. He knew that Gunyenji had been busy with her graduation thesis and homework and had been staying up late every night. Although his heart ached for her, he also knew that if she didn't do this, she wouldn't be able to graduate early. Hua Xiaoheng, like Hijichu, also wanted her to graduate early. Today was New Year's Day, so he had to be on duty as usual. During New Year's, his subordinates could take turns to take time off. As the general commander, he had been on duty during New Year's without exception for 7 years. This was so that his subordinates and soldiers could have more time to rest after working hard for a year. He couldn't see Gunyenji, so all he could do was call her and wish her a Happy New Year. Gunyenji gripped her phone and smiled. Happy New Year to Hua Xiao too. Rising steadily. Hua Xiaoheng couldn't help but laugh. He flicked the ash in his hand and shook his head. You're getting more and more glib. He then asked her, "Are you awake? Have you had breakfast?" Gunyenji quickly got up from the bed and tried to keep her voice steady as she said, "You woke up early. What time is it now? Are you still eating breakfast?" Hua Xiaoheng smirked and said nonchalantly, "Okay, that's good." Then he suddenly asked, "Did you brush your teeth?" Gunyenji subconsciously shook her head. "Not yet. I'm going to do it now." As soon as he said that, he knew it was bad. Wasn't this a confession? She had just said that she had woken up early and had even finished breakfast. In the end, Hua Xiaoheng had tricked her into lying. Gunyenji blushed and said frantically, "Okay, I can't talk to you anymore. I have to go to the library." She hung up the phone and floated into the bathroom with her hands covering her flushed face to wash up. After washing her face, she was in front of the closet picking out clothes for the day when her phone rang again. She picked it up and saw that it was Hijichu calling. She unlocked the phone and answered. "Happy New Year, Professor He." Hijichu was holding a lunchbox in his hand. He stood tall and handsome in front of the female law graduate students' dormitory and called her. "Did you stay up late again last night? Come down, I'm here to bring you food." Gunyenji cheered and rushed to the balcony with the phone in hand. As expected, she saw Hijichu standing under the big tree downstairs. She smiled and waved at him. Then she casually put on a thick fleece sweater with the B University logo, a pair of thin wool pants, and a pair of UGG suede boots to go downstairs. When she came out of the dormitory, Hijichu saw that she wasn't wearing a coat and frowned slightly. "You caught a cold last time and got a fever. Why aren't you careful? Go back quickly, how can you come out without a coat?" He handed the lunchbox to her. "I still have something to do. I'll be going now." Hijichu turned and left without a moment's delay. Gunyenji held the lunchbox and felt a warmth wash over her soul from the inside out. She stared blankly at Hijichu's handsome back as he walked away and felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. This feeling wasn't because she had been in contact with him for a long time. It was because he had been in her mind for a long time. She closed her eyes and suddenly a few fragmented images appeared in front of her. On a patch of green grass, she looked like she was only 5 or 6 years old. She stood under a big banyan tree and hugged a doll. She stared blankly at the back of a young man gradually disappearing into the distance. In the blink of an eye, she was once again at a noisy birthday party. She was wearing a little princess tiara and was already about 10 years old. She looked at the young man's resolute back and suddenly burst into tears. She threw the birthday cake in her hand and threw a tantrum. She only hoped that the young man would turn around and come back. The person heard the movement behind him and gradually slowed down. So she cried even louder and used her hands to cover her chubby little face that was streaming with tears. Her round eyes secretly peeked through the gaps between her fingers at the young man's handsome back in front of her. Finally, the young man turned around, Gunyenji's body trembled, and the images in her mind instantly disappeared. It was as magical as a daydream. She regretted waking up too early and not seeing the young man turn around at all. From the back view, that person really did look like Hijichu, but he was slightly thinner, unlike the current him. Although he was still tall and handsome, he always exuded an inadvertent aura of toughness as he walked. It was an incongruously cute contrast. Gunyenji rubbed her temples and took the food box upstairs. When she returned to the dormitory, she opened the lunchbox Hijichu had given her and found 3 small lunchboxes inside. There was a bowl of steaming hot soup, 3 juicy and delicious soup dumplings, and a small lunchbox of shrimp dumplings. The shrimp dumplings were exquisitely made, and the shrimp filling was a little red. It looked like red bean paste inside a glutinous rice ball. It wasn't as heavy as the glutinous rice ball, but had the lightness of a crystal skin. It looked appetizing at first glance. However, Gunyenji still resisted the desire to eat the shrimp dumplings and obediently drank the soup first. Then she picked up her chopsticks and ate one by one to taste the delicious shrimp dumplings. Although she really wanted to eat, she resisted the urge to gorge herself. She ate 4 shrimp dumplings and stopped eating. However, she finished all the soup dumplings and licked the corners of her mouth. She stretched as if she hadn't had enough. How nice. A new year and a new day began with a full stomach and warm clothes. Gunyenji made a face at the mirror and found a small box to put the remaining shrimp dumplings inside. Then she washed the food box Hijichu brought, dried it and packed it up. She planned to bring it back to him when class started. After a sumptuous brunch, Gunyenji looked at her watch and realized it was almost 11 o'clock. If she went to the library at this time and came back at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, she could study for 6 hours. She packed her bag and took her laptop downstairs. She wrapped a scarf around her neck and rode her bike to the library. The campus was quiet on New Year's Day. Many students had gone to participate in the countdown to New Year's Day last night and only returned to the dormitory in the middle of the night. They were still sleeping at this hour. She was the only one riding on the spacious campus road. She instantly felt relaxed and happy. She even tried to ride the bike with one hand. When she arrived at the library, she parked her bike in the shed in front of the library and ran up the steps with her bag. At this moment, a tall young man wearing a gray coat came out of the library. He had his head down and was walking quickly. This person was Ishihara Taro. Gunyenji was also adjusting her scarf and didn't pay attention to where she was going. The two of them almost bumped into each other. Fortunately, Gunyenji was agile and realized something was wrong at the last moment when they were about to bump into each other. She took a step to the side in time and avoided crashing into the arms of this strange man. She quietly looked up and sized up the man. It turned out to be a handsome young man. He looked at most 15 or 16 years old. Ishihara Taro also looked up at Gunyenji at this moment. He only felt that the girl's eyes were like dark black glass. They were full of brilliance and glowed like treasures. He couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Gunyenji looked at him and suddenly remembered that she had seen him before. On Christmas Day she was also coming out of the library and was almost hit by a bike. When she turned around she saw this young man and even bowed to her. "Sorry to disturb you." Ishihara Taro bowed his head respectfully and looked very polite. Gunyenji looked at him silently and ignored him. She walked directly into the library. When she was completely out of sight, Ishihara Taro finally turned around and stared at the library door. He snorted and muttered, "How rude. That's all there is to him." He shook his head and left B University to return to his apartment. As soon as he returned to his apartment, he opened his email on his computer and replied to a letter. Can you help me get a place as a first-year master's student at B University's Faculty of Law? After this letter was sent, he received a reply very quickly. Of course, you're most welcome. B University's Faculty of Law had a cooperative relationship with Tokyo University's Faculty of Law. The Ishihara family was very influential in Japan, and he himself was the last disciple of the president of Tokyo University. It was completely effortless for him to use his connections to get a place as a first-year master's student at B University's Faculty of Law. Things that were very difficult for others were as easy as lifting a finger for him. After the new year, the students gradually returned to school. Gunyenji attended classes with Hijichu, so she didn't interact much with her classmates. Therefore, she still listened to Machichi when she heard about a very handsome and elegant Japanese exchange student from the first-year master's student at the Faculty of Law. Nyenji, I'm telling you, this kid is amazing. His IQ is off the charts. His looks are off the charts. And his poise and demeanor are off the charts. Machichi sighed with a smile. If he wasn't Japanese, I would have given him full marks. This was the first 3,100-word chapter, and it was still the third chapter today. Asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. At 1 p.m., the monthly votes were 4,800 plus chapters. At 7 p.m., the third chapter. P.S. Dear friends, today is the last day of June. If you have monthly votes, hurry up and vote. If you don't, it will be invalid. Thank you. Chapter 923. Gunyenji was amused and sat in front of the computer without looking up. What about now? What's the score? Machichi sat down on the single sofa next to her and pulled her panda pillow over to hug. She sighed. Since he's Japanese, no matter how hot he is, he still doesn't pass. Gunyenji glanced at her and smiled. That's more like it. She saved the document and closed the computer before turning to Machichi. I believe there are good people among Japanese, but the percentage of good people is too low. It's so low that it's statistically negligible. So overall, I'm discriminating against this group of people in a politically incorrect way. Machichi extended her arm and patted her shoulder. Good job. I support you. Gunyenji pushed her hand away with a smile and winked at her. That's it? In that case, should I tell Brother Xiong that our Chichi met a little fresh meat whose IQ is off the charts, looks off the charts, and manners off the charts? Don't you dare. Machichi panicked and threw the panda pillow away to pounce on Gunyenji. She scratched Gunyenji and laughed until she couldn't breathe. She begged for mercy. Chichi. Good Chichi. I won't do it again. I won't do it again. Stop tickling me. Machichi knew she was ticklish, so she tortured her for a while before letting her go. She pretended to be fierce. Remember this, girl. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. I won't hold back if you say whatever you want. As she spoke, Machichi blew on her fingers and acted as if she was going to continue tickling Gunyenji if she didn't agree. Gunyenji quickly hid to the side and smiled. I won't say it, I won't say it. I really won't say it. She paused and added, I'm not interested in Japanese young men. They don't have the guts to make me mention them. Only then did Machichi relax. She and Gunyenji went to the cafeteria to eat and whispered to her on the way, Nyenji, Brother Xiong is going to my house for New Year's this year, and then he's taking me to his house. Gunyenji was speechless. She was meeting his parents so soon? This was going so fast. You guys are serious? Gunyenji was nervous as well. Chichi, have you really decided to marry Brother Xiong? Both of them wanted to meet each other's parents, so they probably had the idea of getting married. Machichi nodded solemnly. Yes, Nyenji. I'll be 24 next year. I know what I'm doing. Brother Xiong is very nice and he treats me sincerely. I understand him and I know that marrying him is the right choice. Gunyenji was confused. How did you know? How long have you guys been together? Take her and Hua Xiaoheng for example. She had known him for a whole 7 years and had been in love for a year since she was 12. Even then she couldn't say that she completely understood this man. You can't say that. Machichi hugged Gunyenji and rested her chin on her shoulder. Haven't you heard of this saying? Some people were like strangers to each other their entire lives. Some people only met for the first time, but it felt like they had known each other for a lifetime. That's how I feel when I'm with him. Although we haven't known each other for long, it feels like a reunion after a long time. The corners of Gunyenji's mouth twitched. Chichi, you're done for. How can you say something so sour? Now I believe that you really love him. Otherwise you wouldn't have said something so mushy. She shook her shoulders as if trying to shake off the goosebumps. Machichi also felt that she was being too dramatic. Embarrassed, she looked up and hugged Gunyenji's shoulder. She murmured, "Really, that's what I really think. Of course, I don't know what the future will be like, but I can't give up on the present just because I'm worried about something that hasn't happened yet." That made sense. Gunyenji pushed Machichi. "I give up. Okay, let me know when you plan to get married. At least a year in advance so I can save up to buy you a gift." "A gift? Okay. Machichi didn't hesitate to extort Gunyenji. "A Tahiti honeymoon travel set. That's not expensive, right? You can give me this." "Are you sure?" Gunyenji held her hand. "If I give you this, I'm afraid Brother Xiong will cut all ties with me." Gunyenji actually gave him a honeymoon travel set. That was a slap to the groom's face. I don't care. I'm saving money for him." Machichi covered her face and giggled. "You little vixen who values love over friendship. Now you're scheming against me to save money for your husband. Brother Xiong, hurry up and marry your virtuous little vixen. Then I'll have this dorm all to myself." Gunyenji laughed and ran away to prevent Machichi from pouncing on her again. The two of them joked around and another happy day passed. In the following days, Gunyenji was still busy shuttling between the library, the dorm, and the cafeteria. Her days were full and busy. Gunyenji had never seen the Japanese exchange student who had already made a name for himself in his first year of law. Because she didn't have classes, she woke up at 7 in the morning to study at the library and left at 6 in the afternoon. She went to the cafeteria for dinner, then returned to the dorm to continue writing her thesis and homework until the wee hours of the morning. She repeated this cycle without a break. Hijichu and Hua Xiaoheng had a tacit understanding not to disturb her and let her quietly finish the last month of her student life. Ishihara Taro personally approached Gunyenji and observed her for half a month. The conclusion he came to was that this person's life was too monotonous and boring. Day in and day out, a young girl like her could actually endure the loneliness. One evening, Gunyenji came out of the library to find that it had been snowing for the whole day. The weather was fine when she came in the morning, so why was it snowing now? Gunyenji put her hand on her forehead and looked forward. There was already more than an inch of snow on the ground. The snow was loose and made crunching sounds as she walked on it. Students came out of the library in groups of 2s and 3s. Some stood by the door and made calls. Were they probably looking for someone to pick them up? Some carried their school bags on their heads and ran out in the snow. On the road near the library, there were sanitation workers using large brooms to sweep the snow over and over again. There were also snow shovelers driving back and forth on the campus paths. They shoveled the snow and sprinkled salt to prevent it from freezing. Gunyenji originally wanted to call Machichi but decided against it after thinking about it. It was snowing and not raining anyway, so it was better not to bother her. She put on the hood of her coat and checked her school bag and laptop bag again to make sure that the zippers were closed. Only then did she imitate the other students and carry her school bag on her head to walk forward. Gunyenji rushed into the heavy snow after she went down the stairs of the library. Snow particles flew everywhere and mixed in with the large patches of snow. Occasionally, some of them floated to her face and were quickly melted by her warm skin before freezing again. It hurt a little. She simply took out the silk scarf around her neck and wrapped it around half her face. Then she put on her sunglasses to feel better. At this moment, the black-clothed youth who was standing not far away took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his hands. Along with the handkerchief, a shiny golden coin rolled forward along the path that had just been cleaned. A boy with a school bag on his head ran forward with his head lowered. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the coin. The shiny gold color? Could it be a gold coin? He couldn't help but bend down to pick up the coin. As he bent down, a sanitation worker who was cleaning behind him couldn't dodge in time and was knocked to the ground by him. The snow shoveler that was about to drive over quickly swerved to the side to avoid the sanitation worker who had fallen to the ground in front of him. Gunyenji carried her school bag and happened to walk to the blind spot of the snow shoveler's rearview mirror. The driver of the snow shoveler didn't expect a student to walk to his blind spot at that time. He only cared about avoiding the sanitation worker who had fallen to the ground in front of him. He turned the steering wheel vigorously, and the large bucket of the snow shoveler cut across to the side. "Ah, be careful. There's someone over there." A few sanitation workers and students saw this scene and shouted in unison. Although Gunyenji had her head down, she still noticed the sudden change of direction of the snow shoveler. She quickly twisted her body and retreated to the side of the road. In the end, she was so busy avoiding the snow shoveler that she didn't notice that there was a rock garden on the side of the road. Stumbling back from the main road, her feet inevitably slipped on the thin layer of ice on the side of the road. The back of her head suddenly crashed into a sharp rock protruding from the rock garden. Ishihara Taro, who was standing not far away, saw this scene that he had personally calculated. Even he couldn't help but get excited. Crash, crash. As long as she hit the back of her head, she would be crippled even if she didn't die. But at that moment, a rock flew out of nowhere and hit Gunyenji's knee. Her legs turned to jelly, and before she could fall back, she sat on the ground and fell hard on her butt. This is the second update. Monthly votes of 4,800 plus updates have been delivered. Today is the third update. Please recommend votes and monthly votes. 7 p.m. the third update. P.S. Dear friends, today is the last day of June. If you have monthly votes, hurry up and vote. If you don't, it will be invalid. Thank you. Chapter 924. As soon as he saw that Gunyenji hadn't hit the protruding rocks on the rockery and had instead sat on the ground, Ishihara Taro's expression turned ugly. He clenched his fists tightly, and his fingernails dug into his palms. However, he didn't feel any pain, only discomfort. He glared hatefully at Gunyenji. Wearing the same sunglasses, he quickly turned to leave. He didn't want to stay any longer. To Gunyenji, this was a really hard fall. She sat on the ground and felt her head ringing. She couldn't recover for a long time. A few students nearby ran over and asked, "Classmate, are you okay?" Gunyenji shook her head lightly. "I'm fine." She used her hands to push herself up, but the fall was too painful. Her tailbone seemed to have been shaken, and she gasped in pain. At that moment, a slender, fair hand reached over. The shape of the hand was very perfect. The knuckles were straight and no bones could be seen at all. However, it didn't seem soft either. Instead, it contained an indescribable strength. The clean fingernails had a full crescent shape. It was healthy and refreshing. There was also a faint ring mark on the middle finger of the left hand. Gunyenji slowly raised her head. Her sunglasses had fallen off the bridge of her nose due to the force of her fall. They hung loosely on her nose and she looked a little comical. However, the pair of big dark eyes added a sense of endearment to her dazed expression. It was Hijichu standing in front of her and reaching out to her. "What's wrong? Can't get up?" Gunyenji gritted her teeth and grabbed Hijichu's hand. Hijichu noticed the moment she exerted force. He immediately bent down and carried her horizontally. "I'll take you to the hospital." On second thought, Gunyenji probably couldn't go to a normal hospital. Hijichu immediately corrected himself. "Call Hua Xiaoheng and ask him to take you to his hospital. That Dr. Chin of yours has been treating you all this time, right?" Gunyenji narrowed her eyes and grunted softly. It seemed like her constitution was indeed very special. Hua Xiaoheng knew, Qinlai knew, and Hijichu also knew. The three of them had intentionally not allowed her to go to a normal hospital for treatment, even if it was a small problem like a fall. She pulled out her phone and dialed Hua Xiaoheng's number. Hua Xiaoheng was in the middle of a meeting. According to the rules, no electronic devices could be brought into the meeting, including smartphones. Therefore, the person who answered the phone was the operator from the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces. He heard Gunyenji's voice and immediately connected to Hua Xiaoheng's phone. Unfortunately, all he got was a voicemail. Gunyenji thought about it and called Yin Shixiang. Yin Shixiang wasn't in a meeting. He saw that it was Gunyenji's number and answered with a smile. "Yenji? What is it? You actually took time out of your busy schedule to call Brother Xiong." "Brother Xiong is flattered, ha." Gunyenji gripped her phone and saw that Hijichu was staring intently at her. She had no choice but to whisper to Yin Shixiang, "Brother Xiong, I fell just now. There might be some bone problems. Can you take me to Brother Chen's for a checkup?" Gunyenji volunteered to be examined, and Yin Shixiang immediately became serious. "How did you fall? Where did you fall? Could he move? If not, I'll send an ambulance." There was a stretcher in the ambulance so it wouldn't aggravate her injury. Gunyenji felt the pain in her tailbone and thought it would be better to have a stretcher. She said quietly, "Okay, if it's not too much trouble." Yin Shixiang immediately called Qinlai. "Dr. Chen, Yenji seems to be injured. Can you send an ambulance to her school to pick her up for a checkup?" Qinlai was also shocked to hear that an ambulance was needed. He quickly said, "Okay, I'll take the ambulance there myself." Qinlai hurriedly put on his coat and white lab coat, then left with his medical team. Hijichu carried Gunyenji to the car and laid her flat on the back seat. "Wait for a while. When Dr. Chin arrives, get in the ambulance directly." Lying in the back seat, it was difficult for her to nod, but she still nodded. It was just that when He Jichu carried her over, many students had seen them. If she wasn't mistaken, someone had taken out their phone to secretly take pictures of them. However, as soon as the ambulance arrived, everyone would understand. There were very few people who liked to make groundless accusations. Ijichu didn't get into the car. Instead, he stood outside the car door and scanned everyone with an indifferent gaze. It was still snowing and the students who had been watching were a bit embarrassed. They gradually dispersed, but there was still a steady stream of students who expressed their curiosity. His car was parked on the snow-covered grass on the side of the road. Although it was winter and there was no grass on the grass, the ground here was still softer than other places. Gunyenji asked Hijichu in the car, "Professor He, why did you drive here on such a snowy day?" Hijichu crossed his arms and crossed his long legs. He replied dryly, "I came to pick you up." Gunyenji was speechless. "Did you hit me with a rock just now?" Gunyenji couldn't help asking. "That was really hard." Hijichu turned to look at her. "No. But I have to thank the person who hit you. Otherwise you wouldn't be lying here talking to me now." Hijichu's heart almost jumped out of his throat when he recalled what had just happened. He had just gotten out of the car and was behind Gunyenji. He could only watch as she fell backward. The protruding rock was so sharp that it looked like a sharp knife. If the back of Gunyenji's head had really hit the protruding rock, then the consequences would have been unimaginable. So when he saw that Gunyenji hadn't actually hit the rock, but for some reason her legs had slipped and she was actually sitting on the ground, he was able to gasp for air. It really felt like someone was strangling him. He didn't even dare to breathe. Gunyenji's heart skipped a beat. How could there be such a coincidence? Her camera-like memory and meticulous brain started working again. This time, the situation was so similar to the last time she had almost been hit by a bicycle. Last time, a boy on a skateboard had also rushed over and knocked the bicycle down. That was why she hadn't been hit. This time it was also a stone that flew out of nowhere that hit her knee. Only then did she fall back to the ground. However, the recoil force was so strong that when she fell backwards, it was all on her tailbone. Gunyenji used a physics formula to calculate the pressure she had to bear when she fell backwards. It was roughly equivalent to someone hitting her back with a 10-kilogram hammer. Then again, the skateboard boy who had helped her block the car last time and the rock that had been hiding in the dark this time seemed to be a method that people from Huashaoheng's side often used. They were all quietly protecting you and getting you out of trouble. You usually couldn't feel their presence, but at the critical moment, they would definitely appear to save you from trouble. Could it really have been arranged by Huashaoheng? She also remembered that when Huashaoheng had forced her to get married, he had also said that if he said that, her security level would return to the highest level as soon as possible. She didn't know how long her imagination had been running wild, but she finally heard the sound of an ambulance approaching from afar. The door opened and Chin Lai, wearing a white doctor's gown, jumped out of the car. Behind him was a stretcher team, and they rushed to Hijichu's parked car on the side of the road. This is the third chapter and today is still the third chapter. Please vote for recommendation votes and monthly votes. P.S. Dear friends, today is the last day of June. If you have monthly votes, hurry up and vote. If you don't, it will be invalid. Thank you. P.S. Yesterday's chapter has been revised. It should be 15 billion US dollars. Dear friends, you can see it when you download that chapter again. The chapter at noon has also been revised with a small detail. Dear friends, you can see it when you download it again. Mwah. Chapter 925. Ijichu stepped to the side and opened the door. He bent down to carry Gunyenji out. Chin Lai froze and turned to call for a stretcher. Hijichu ignored Chin Lai's scrutinizing gaze and carefully placed Gunyenji on the stretcher. His gaze was gentle and loving, as if she was his most precious treasure. Chin Lai pursed his lips and thought to himself that he was the one who saw this. If it had been Huashao, he shuddered. Huashao had always been a man of few words. Now that he had gained experience, he wasn't happy with material things or sad about himself. He had never been as cold as Hijichu. He always had a faint smile no matter who he was. It wasn't obvious and was almost invisible, but it made people feel like they were sitting on a spring breeze. They admired him from the bottom of their hearts and even submitted to him. They were only willing to listen to his orders. He didn't seem unapproachable, but his calm and unperturbed appearance was even more unfathomable, causing others to be unable to make head or tail of him. This was the quality of a true leader. Even Chin Lai, who had been his brother and comrade in arms for so many years, couldn't figure out what he was thinking. That was why Huashao was getting higher and higher, while Chin Lai was still stuck at the rank of senior colonel. It was difficult for him to advance any further. Qin shook his head and thought to himself that he really had nothing better to do. How could he think of such nonsense at a time like this? He also knew very well that no matter how reserved Hua Xiaoheng was, Gu Nianji would always be someone special to him. There was no doubt about that. Qin followed the stretcher back to the ambulance and waved to He Zhichu. Professor He, thank you for notifying us in time. I'll send you Nianji's condition after the hospital examination. He Zhichu folded his hands behind his back and looked inside the ambulance. Gu Nianji was lying on the stretcher and was already secured by several straps. No matter how the ambulance bumped, she wouldn't suffer any further injuries. He nodded and said, then I'll have to trouble you. Colonel Yin has my number if you don't know. Okay, I'll ask him, Qin said politely and closed the back door of the ambulance. Soon, the ambulance left the B University campus with its lights flashing. Only then did the spectating students disperse. It turned out that the girl had suffered such a serious injury. No wonder Professor He had carried her. The students who had secretly taken photos felt embarrassed, and most of them deleted the photos on their phones. However, there were also a few people who were indignant and secretly kept the photos. Especially the last photo of He Zhichu carrying Gu Nianji onto the stretcher. Anyone with eyes could tell at a glance that he loved her deeply. The ambulance flashed its lights and moved smoothly on the road. Soon, it arrived at the medical building of the Special Operations Forces headquarters. Qin opened the car door and got out. He found Hua Xiaoheng and Yin Shixiang already waiting at the entrance of the medical building. He was still wearing the military uniform from the meeting. The military cap on his head was pressed low, covering his eyebrows. His deep eyes were extremely black, but also extremely bright, like a torch in the dark night. On the surface, there was a raging flame burning under the calmness. He stood there calmly, his tall and strong body wrapped in a general's uniform. The seams of his trousers were perfectly straight, and the collar button was neatly buttoned without a single crease. A stretcher was wheeled out of the ambulance, and Gu Nianji was immobilized by straps. Hua Xiaoheng quickened his steps to the stretcher and quickly looked at Gu Nianji. Where are you hurt? Hua Xiaoheng reached out to touch Gu Nianji's forehead out of habit. When she was young, whenever she felt unwell, Hua Xiaoheng would always touch her forehead to see if she had a fever. This habit was deeply ingrained and had remained until now. But she had hurt her tailbone, not a headache or fever. Gu Nianji curled her lips and wanted to laugh. But when Hua Xiaoheng's warm palm touched her forehead, she couldn't laugh anymore. An iron-blooded and unyielding man occasionally revealed a trace of warmth. No matter how strong her defenses were, she was completely defeated by his gentle touch that brought back memories of the past. Gu Nianji lay on the stretcher and smiled at Hua Xiaoheng. As she smiled, she realized tears were flowing down her cheeks. Hua Xiaoheng thought Gu Nianji was crying from the pain. Although he was extremely anxious, he only took out a tissue to wipe her tears. He then said to Qin calmly, "Don't delay. Get her to the operating room now." Qin shuddered and didn't dare to joke with Hua Xiaoheng anymore. He quickly turned to his medical staff. "Get into the elevator and get her to my special infirmary." His medical staff were all well-trained experts. He didn't need to say anything else. They had already worked together to send Gu Nianji to Qin special infirmary. Qin performed a full-body CT scan on Gu Nianji as soon as she arrived to be safe. He was worried that other than her tailbone, there might be other problems. But Gu Nianji's foundation was too good. Although the fall had caused her tailbone to hurt unbearably, only her tailbone was severely fractured. Everything else was fine. Qin's CT results came out, and he carefully checked it twice to make sure there were no other problems before letting her return to the bed. Because it was a bone problem, she was in a special bed this time. It was like an inverted human body. She could lie in it and maintain a motionless posture. Under normal circumstances, someone with a severe fracture like Gu Nianji's would have to lie in a bed like this for at least 3 months to wait for the bone to heal. But because of Gu Nianji's special constitution, Qin felt that 2 weeks should be enough. Hua Xiaoheng had been waiting outside the ward the whole time. He didn't speak. He held a cigarette in one hand and stood in the hallway facing the window. It was still snowing outside and the weather was getting colder. Hua Xiaoheng only wore a woolen military uniform with a casual shirt underneath, but he felt extremely hot. Even the cigarette in his hand couldn't calm him down. Of course, no one could tell how anxious he was just by looking at his appearance. He opened the window and the cold wind and snowflakes rushed in. It was refreshing. He wore a Bluetooth headset and was listening to the report from the Secret Service personnel next to Gu Nianji. "Hua Xiao, this is what happened this time. The situation was very chaotic, but fortunately, there were 4 of us and we could cover her from 4 directions. Therefore, when I realized that she might fall backward and hit the sharp rocks on the rockery, in a moment of panic I hit her knee with a rock. This way she wouldn't fall backward, but her center of gravity would shift and she would sit on the ground. After a pause, the person said carefully, "Huoxiao, is Miss Gu's injury very serious? Did I make a mistake?" The four of them were responsible for secretly protecting Gu Nianji. In the past they had easily resolved some of the small matters. The last 2 times, however, had become more and more intense. This time, in order to prevent her from being more seriously injured, they had chosen a less damaging measure. But she was still injured. Compared to the consequences of hitting the back of her head and dying, the consequences of falling to the ground and not being able to move were unimaginable. The Secret Service personnel felt that he had made a mistake and was very upset. "Huoxiao, you can punish me. I didn't do my job well. If I had appeared earlier, I could have directly sent her back to the dormitory." Huoxiao didn't blame him at all. His voice was very calm and gentle. "It's fine. You did very well. You didn't do anything wrong. Why should I punish you? Because you saved Miss Gu's life, so I have to punish you? Do you think I'm such a muddle-headed boss?" The Secret Service personnel didn't expect Huoxiao to not blame him at all. He was so touched that his insides burned. The burly man's eyes actually heated up and tears flowed down his cheeks. He quickly wiped them with the back of his hand and said as naturally as possible, "Yes, I understand. Thank you for your understanding, Huoxiao. I'll be more careful in the future." "You did very well. Don't blame yourself." Huoxiao didn't continue the topic. Instead he said, "From your report, Nianji has been in a lot of situations recently. Did you compare the frequency of these situations with the previous ones?" The person quickly said, "The 4 of us were planning to have a meeting. It's been a bit strange recently. We'll write a report for you after we've summarized all the situations." Huoxiao nodded. "Okay, send it to my email when you're done." He paused and reminded them, "The sooner the better." As soon as he hung up, Qinlai called. "Huoxiao, the situation has been checked. You can come in now." Huoxiao immediately threw away the cigarette in his hand and turned to return to Qinlai's special infirmary. He glanced at Gu Nianji, who was lying on the hospital bed. He didn't walk over directly. Instead, he entered Qinlai's office. "How's the injury?" Huoxiao sat in front of his desk and picked up the CT report to look at. Qinlai displayed the CT image and explained to him, "The fracture of the tailbone is very serious. To be honest, most people with this kind of injury will have difficulty moving for the rest of their lives." Huoxiao looked up at Qinlai. He didn't say anything, but his gaze was so heavy that Qinlai almost couldn't breathe. He could only say, "Of course, Nianji is an exception. It's not like you don't know about her constitution." Huoxiao looked down and grunted. "What will happen to her?" "She'll be in bed for 2 weeks. She should be able to heal," Qinlai said tentatively. The truth was, he wasn't sure how much it would heal. After all, this was Gu Nianji's first time having such a serious fracture. It was just like the old scars she had when she was young. Although they had healed, they inevitably left scars. Huoxiao's grip on the CT report tightened, and he almost tore the report into pieces. The corners of Qinlai's mouth twitched. His heart ached as he looked at the data in his report. He wanted nothing more than to pounce on Huoxiao and snatch his treasure from his hands. Huoxiao sat for a while before putting the report back. He stood up and straightened his military uniform. "When she recovers, this report must be destroyed." "Yes, Chief." Qinlai nodded solemnly. He wasn't joking about something like this. Huoxiao nodded and turned to walk out of Qinlai's office. He even closed the door to block his view. Qinlai was speechless. Rubbing his nose, Qinlai silently turned off the camera in the ward. Huoxiao came to Gu Nianji's bed and sat down. He held her hand and said in a hoarse voice, "Where does it hurt?" This is the first 3,200-word chapter. Today is the first day of July, and the new guaranteed monthly votes have been dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. At 1 p.m., the monthly votes for June will increase by 5,100. At 7 p.m., the third chapter. P.S. Dear friends, you were amazing yesterday. Thank you for your monthly votes. Thank you to the leader, I am Master Rashi, for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Moi. Chapter 926. Of course, a fractured bone was painful. People who had never experienced it couldn't imagine what kind of pain it was. If he didn't know about Gu Nianji's special constitution, Qinlai would definitely have given her painkillers because that kind of pain wasn't something an ordinary person could endure. However, Gunyanji rarely complained about pain in front of him. Even if she said it hurt a lot, when Chenlai asked her if she needed painkillers, she would say, "Bear with it. If I can't take it anymore, I'll take the painkillers." Up until now, there hadn't been any pain she couldn't endure, physical pain. To her, emotional pain was much harder to endure than physical pain. Seeing Hua Xiaoheng's forbearing gaze, Gunyanji smiled slightly. "It's okay, it's not that painful." It was much better than the high-voltage shock she'd suffered in the blue hole. It was about the same pain as when she'd been electrocuted by ALS in Germany. Although that was the case, it was still unbearable for most people when the pain was reduced from 10% to 80%. Because she was enduring it, her palms began to sweat. Hua Xiaoheng felt the wetness in her palms and knew very well that she was in so much pain that she was sweating, yet she still insisted it didn't hurt. Staring at her forehead that was gradually drenched in sweat, Hua Xiaoheng closed his eyes. "Sleep. It won't hurt anymore after you sleep. I'll stay here with you." It was actually very difficult to fall asleep with so much pain. However, since Hua Xiaoheng said that, Gunyanji still closed her eyes and tried to sleep. After a while, Hua Xiaoheng saw Gunyanji's eyes roll slightly under her tightly shut eyelids. He tried his best to smile but couldn't. He gently put her hand back under the blanket. "Can't sleep?" Gunyanji opened her eyes and answered honestly. Seeing that Hua Xiaoheng's expression was too cold and stern, as if he would pull out a gun and kill her the next second, Gunyanji thought about it and said slowly, "Sing me flying bugs and I'll fall asleep." Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. His eyes quickly glanced at the place with the camera and secretly decided to go to Chenlai's place later to get him to delete this part. Gunyanji didn't really want Hua Xiaoheng to sing. She only wanted to use this opportunity to eliminate Hua Xiaoheng's murderous aura and anger. This was not good. For someone in Hua Xiaoheng's position, it was a big taboo. This person rarely had such strong emotional fluctuations. In the past, Gunyanji only felt that he was too calm and didn't respond to her feelings and passion. After suffering such a huge blow, she was very disheartened. Now that she realized that he was finally angry, she began to worry about his safety and future. Gunyanji endured the pain rising from her tailbone and slowly reached out from under the blanket to cover the back of Hua Xiaoheng's hand. She forced a smile at him and said gently, "I'm fine, don't worry." Hua Xiaoheng turned his head abruptly and looked up at the sky. Suppressing the tears in the corners of his eyes, he turned back and placed her hand back under the blanket. He secured it with a belt and sang softly, "The dark sky hangs low, the bright stars follow, the insects fly, who are you thinking of? The stars in the sky shed tears, the roses on the ground wither, the cold wind blows as long as you are with me. Insects fly and flowers sleep. Only pairs of them are beautiful. Don't be afraid of the dark, only afraid of heartbreak, no matter if you're tired or not, no matter where you are." Gunyanji had never heard Hua Xiaoheng sing before. It was her first time hearing him sing under such circumstances, and it was completely unaccompanied. There was no accompaniment or beat, but it was extremely beautiful. Hua Xiaoheng's voice was already on the low side. Now that he had lowered his voice to sing without any accompaniment, the heavy impact of the subwoofer on the scene made Gunyanji, who was a fan of sound, want to kneel down. She looked at Hua Xiaoheng almost obsessively. Her eyes were filled with longing, which greatly encouraged Hua Xiaoheng and pleased him. He sat on the edge of her bed and sang Flying Bugs over and over again until she gradually fell asleep. Chenlai worked in the office for a while and remembered to send He Jichu a message. He found Yin Shixiang's number and called. He asked for He Jichu's number and sent a message saying that Gunyanji was fine. She only had some broken bones and needed to rest. After sending the message, he was hungry. He looked at his watch and wanted to go out to find something to eat. He opened the door and saw Hua Xiaoheng sitting by Gunyanji's bed. His body leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together to support his chin. He looked at Gunyanji intently and sang to her over and over again. Chenlai's knees went weak and he really slid down the door. He finally steadied himself by holding on to the door frame and immediately crawled back to his office. He decided that even if he was so hungry that he could only eat dog food, he would never leave the office. What a joke. If Hua Xiaoheng found out that he had eavesdropped on him singing to Gunyanji, he would die. The office door quietly closed and Chenlai began working again. It was not until it was dark that he thought he would not sing again, so he secretly opened the office door to take a look. Fortunately, Gunyanji was already asleep, and Hua Xiaoheng was not singing again. Thank God he could go out to eat. Chenlai clutched his stomach as he walked out of the office. He followed the corner of the wall and wanted to slip out without attracting attention. But even if Hua Xiaoheng did not look away, he knew he had come out. Stop. Chen Lai immediately stopped in his tracks and smiled apologetically. Hua Xiao, what's the matter? Hua Xiaoheng looked down and adjusted the blanket for Gun Yanji. Is there a camera in this ward? Yes, of course there was. Chen Lai replied excitedly. But Hua Xiao, don't worry, I turned it off just now. Ever since Nianji came, the camera has been turned off. Hua Xiaoheng turned to look at him. Really? I can make a military pledge. Chen Lai almost pointed to the heavens and swore. At least you know what's good for you. Hua Xiaoheng snorted and waved his hand. You can leave. Chen Lai felt like he had been pardoned and quickly ran out. He only remembered after he left. What the hell? That was his office. What was with Hua Xiaoheng acting like the host was chasing his guest away? Chen Lai cursed Hua Xiaoheng indignantly, but he did not dare to say a word in front of Hua Xiaoheng. After Chen Lai left, Gun Yanji began to have a fever. Hua Xiaoheng knew that this should be normal. Gun Yanji's body seemed to need a fever to stimulate the body's immunity and recovery ability. Every time she was seriously ill or seriously injured, it would be accompanied by a high fever. He just didn't know how long the fever would last this time. Hua Xiaoheng began to pay attention to the changes in Gun Yanji's body temperature. The special hospital bed was fully equipped, and Gun Yanji's body temperature and heartbeat were all monitored by special equipment. Chen Lai returned from dinner and brought Hua Xiaoheng a box of food. Hua Xiao, it's time for dinner. Chen Lai placed the box in front of Hua Xiaoheng. At that moment, he noticed that Gun Yanji's body temperature was rising rapidly. He was surprised and said, "This curve is rising faster than before. It looks like we'll have to take turns sleeping tonight. We can't be without people here." Hua Xiaoheng did not turn his head. "Go to sleep. I'll watch." It was the second night, and the June monthly tickets had been delivered at 5,100 plus night. Today was the first day of July, and the new guaranteed monthly tickets had already been dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. The third night at 7 p.m. P.S. Flying Bugs was a children's song written by Mr. Lin Shi and composed by Mr. Chen Guangrong. It was very nice, especially with a male voice singing in a low voice. The effect was simply. Chapter 927. Hua Xiaoheng really hadn't closed his eyes the entire night. He had been monitoring Gun Yanji's condition. In the middle of the night, Gun Yanji's temperature had risen so high that the equipment was beeping alarms. Hua Xiaoheng suppressed his anxiety and whispered to Chen Lai, who had come to check on Gun Yanji, "She's burning up so badly. Will she be okay?" "That's hard to say. Maybe she'll burn herself into a retard." Chen Lai deliberately dragged out his tone to play the official tone with Hua Xiaoheng to get back at him for scaring him with her singing today. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. His sword-like eyebrows were just about to rise when Chen Lai immediately backed down. "Ha ha ha, Hua Xiao, I was just joking with you. No, Nianji won't become a retard. But why is her temperature so high? It's even higher than the last time." Hua Xiaoheng was talking about a year and a half ago when Gun Yanji was infected with H3Ob7 and had a high fever that lasted for 2 weeks. Even that time's temperature wasn't as high as this time. Chen Lai was also puzzled but didn't dare to pat his chest and say she was definitely fine. But looking at Hua Xiaoheng's eyes, if he dared to say something was wrong, then he would definitely be in trouble before Gun Yanji. "Hua Xiao, you still don't believe me?" Chen Lai puffed out his fat chest. "My medical skills may not be world-class, but they're renowned both at home and abroad. If I say she's fine, then she's fine." But as soon as Hua Xiaoheng turned around, Chen Lai pressed his palms together and silently prayed to the unconscious Gun Yanji, "Nianji, you have to be fine. You have to be fine." Hua Xiaoheng suddenly turned around. Chen Lai immediately folded his hands behind his back and shook his head as he looked around the equipment. He looked confident and busy. Hua Xiaoheng believed half of it but couldn't relax the other half. He and Chen Lai both sat by Gun Yanji's bed and didn't speak. One watched the changes in the equipment while the other watched Gun Yanji's expression. Both of them had a tacit understanding that the other wasn't confident either. After a night of anxiety, the sky finally brightened and the temperature and heartbeat displayed on the equipment gradually returned to normal. Chen Lai sighed and got up to wipe his sweat. He didn't tell Hua Xiaoheng that he was drenched in sweat. If he took off his shirt and wrung it, he would be sweating profusely. Hua Xiaoheng didn't sweat, but he was no less nervous than Chen Lai. The last time Gun Yanji was in danger in Germany, he didn't know. By the time he found out, she had already escaped safely. For this, Hua Xiaoheng felt guilty for a period of time. But now that Gun Yanji was in the Huaxia Empire and under his close protection, something like this still happened. He couldn't forgive himself. Of course, no matter how angry he was, he had to ensure Gu Nianji's health first. Gu Nianji slowly woke up and saw Hua Xiaoheng's concerned eyes when she opened her eyes. He probably hadn't slept all night. Stubble had appeared on his chin, but it didn't make him look sloppy. Instead, it added to his unruly masculine charm. It made Hua Xiaoheng, who had always been solemn and awe-inspiring, look even more handsome in a different way. Gu Nianji sighed inwardly. Did this man realize how lethal his appearance and voice were to her? She was still seriously injured, but he kept flirting with her. He was really too much. Gu Nianji pouted and moved subconsciously. She realized it didn't hurt at all. She was very stunned. The piercing pain in her tailbone yesterday was still fresh in her memory, but now she couldn't feel it at all. This was really strange. Did her self-healing ability go up another level? Hua Xiaoheng looked at Gu Nianji for a long time and saw that she wasn't moving at all. Her eyes were blank and he was a bit unsure. Chen Lai's words from yesterday still rang in his ears. Had he really jinxed it? Nianji? Nianji? Hua Xiaoheng couldn't help calling her softly. Gu Nianji came back to her senses and wanted to reach out, but found that her arms were also tied up. Her bones hurt yesterday, so it was fine when they were tied up. Now that there was nothing wrong with her body, it was uncomfortable to be tied up. Gu Nianji blinked. Hua Xiao, untie me. I'm fine now. It doesn't hurt anymore. Really? Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. Did this mean her brain wasn't fried, but she was hallucinating? Hua Xiaoheng leaned over and pressed Gu Nianji's shoulder. Don't move. Your bones are injured. It'll be very troublesome if you don't recover. But I don't hurt anymore. I'm fine now. Gu Nianji quickly widened her eyes at Hua Xiaoheng. Look at me. I'm really fine. Gu Nianji's voice was rather loud, so Chen Lai, who had been watching from the sidelines, had to come over to help. Putting on his glasses, Chen Lai hurriedly stood up. What's wrong? What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Gu Nianji quickly said, Brother Chen, can you tell Hua Xiao that I'm really fine? Can you not tie me up? I can't take it. Chen Lai saw Gu Nianji speak with such vigor and was half convinced that she was fine. People with severe bone fractures would speak with a lack of breath. They definitely wouldn't be like Gu Nianji, who was almost speaking from her chest. It was especially crisp and tender, as delicious as the first green cucumber in early summer. However, Chen Lai was a doctor, so he had to completely believe that Gu Nianji was fine. Of course, he had to go through the equipment and not just look at the surface. He pushed Hua Xiaoheng away and said to Gu Nianji, Let me check your temperature and pulse. After checking the equipment, he found that everything was normal. Her temperature, heartbeat, pulse, and blood pressure were no different from a normal person. Compared to the sky-high temperature last night, the current temperature data looked like a cute little angel. Chen Lai reached over and pressed a button to unbuckle all the belts on the bed. He said to Gu Nianji, Take another CT scan. Can you walk over by yourself? Gu Nianji sat up with a grunt. Yes. Hua Xiaoheng's brows were already furrowed. He watched Gu Nianji jump up from the bed, and his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. He walked over with a solemn expression and carried her horizontally. He asked Chen Lai, Where's the CT? Chen Lai pretended not to see that Hua Xiaoheng had already carried Gu Nianji. He said to the confused Gu Nianji nonchalantly, It's over there. You went there yesterday. He turned around and walked away. Hua Xiaoheng carried Gu Nianji to the CT room and placed her on the conveyor belt. Chen Lai started the equipment and performed a second full-body examination on her. After the examination, Chen Lai looked at the CT data and the radiographic films. He couldn't believe his eyes. One night. Only one night. The severe bone fracture from yesterday had completely healed. He had originally estimated that it would take at least 2 weeks. And this time he didn't know if it was because the new injury had been treated in time, but it had healed especially well. There were no scars at all. It was completely different from a normal bone fracture patient's condition after recovery. It was as if she had never been injured in the first place. Chen Lai's hands trembled as he looked at the data. He placed it side by side with yesterday's report in front of him. He was so shaken that he almost couldn't sit still. After Gu Nianji left the CT room, Chen Lai called out to Hua Xiaoheng. He said dreamily, Hua Xiao, you must protect Nianji well. Don't let her have any chance of getting hurt again. I'm really afraid that we won't be able to hide it anymore. He felt that Gu Nianji's self-healing ability was already a perfect recovery at the genetic level. It wasn't an ordinary enhanced self-healing ability of the human body. And as she grew older, this self-healing ability became stronger and stronger. After Chen Lai said this, he took the initiative to burn both reports in front of Hua Xiaoheng. He also destroyed all the temporary data that had been kept in the CT. Hua Xiaoheng saw Qinlai destroy the data that he had always regarded as a treasure. He finally understood the seriousness of the matter. It was the third watch. Today was the first day of July. The new guaranteed monthly votes had already been dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. Good night, dear friends. Chapter 928. How could this be? Hua Xiaoheng's relaxed brows furrowed again. His expression was solemn. I don't understand medicine. Can you explain it more scientifically? If he didn't know Hua Xiaoheng well, Qinlai would have thought that Hua Xiaoheng was deliberately saying this to slap him in the face. If he could scientifically explain Gunyinji's special constitution, he would have become an international pioneer in genetic medicine. How could he be scared out of his wits by a set of test data? But even though he understood that Hua Xiaoheng didn't mean to embarrass him, Qinlai still felt very uncomfortable. He had been hailed as a medical genius since he was a teenager. Even his doctoral supervisor had to admit that he was inferior. This was the first time he had encountered a difficult problem. Qinlai sat behind his desk and groaned for a long time. His eyelids drooped as he said nonchalantly, I'm inexperienced and ignorant. I can't, scientifically, explain what's going on for now. He threw his pen away angrily and turned his head to the side to stare at the stainless steel trash can in the corner. Hua Xiaoheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He relaxed a little and reached out to knock on Qinlai's desk. I was just asking if you could explain Yinji's condition from a medical perspective. Why are you throwing a tantrum? Qinlai was silent for a while. He also felt that his anger was a little strange. He scratched his head and chuckled. He said guiltily, Hua Xiao, I'm not throwing a tantrum at you. I'm throwing a tantrum at myself. He coughed lightly. I really don't know why it's like this, but I have a rough idea of what's causing her physical condition. Speak. Let's put it this way. The human body has the ability to repair itself. Everyone has it. For example, getting sick, having a fever, or fighting a virus is a sign that the human body is trying to repair itself. But the average person's self-repair ability isn't that strong. If they can't handle it, they have to see a doctor and take medicine. Hua Xiaoheng nodded. I know that. As for Gunyinji, her body's self-repair ability is probably several times that of the average person. That's why we discovered these special traits. Qinlai made the final decision. Also, from the example of your mother accepting her bone marrow cells and successfully recovering, her self-repair ability can be transmitted. That means that her genes are like medicine and can cure other people. That's the scariest thing. Hua Xiaoheng had been in the army since he was 18 years old and had been in the army for more than a decade. He had been through life and death situations and had seen as much as the generals during the war. He had long developed the ability to remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. But when he heard Qinlai's last sentence, his expression changed and he couldn't speak for a long time. The entire medical building was clearly controlled by the central air conditioner to maintain a constant temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. But Hua Xiaoheng felt that the harsh winter weather outside the building had already invaded his body. It made him shiver all over. So, I want you to be more careful. You can't let anything happen to Gunyinji again. This time, Professor, he was smart enough to inform us to pick her up. If someone else had been sent to another hospital while Gunyinji was unconscious, think about the consequences. Qinlai's warning to Hua Xiaoheng was not only for Gunyinji, but also for Hua Xiaoheng. To be honest, Hua Xiaoheng had seriously violated the rules. At the very least, he would not be able to escape the charge of deceiving his superiors and deceiving his subordinates. As a soldier, it was an unforgivable felony to obey orders but secretly disobey orders. Hua Xiaoheng's only defense was that he hadn't been ordered to report everything about Gunyinji. The orders he had received from beginning to end had only been to search for Gunyinji's background and investigate the person who had drawn the engine blueprints. But if Gunyinji's physical condition was exposed, those people wouldn't think that way. They would only say that Hua Xiaoheng was playing with words and still put the label of disobeying orders on him. For Gunyinji, Hua Xiaoheng was practically risking his entire future. In the face of Qinlai's warning, Hua Xiaoheng only shook his head nonchalantly. He stared at Qinlai and said, as long as you keep your mouth shut about this, I promise there won't be any problems. Of course I won't say anything. Qinlai glared at Hua Xiaoheng. I see Yinji as my own sister. Who would want their own family to be a lab rat? You can set your mind at ease. Okay. Hua Xiaoheng stood up and adjusted his military cap. Then it's fine. I'll take Yinji to my official residence for 2 days and think about what to do in the future. Qinlai didn't object. He winked at him. Go. But she's still recovering from her injuries. Take it easy. Hua Xiaoheng pretended not to hear the perverted meaning in Qinlai's words. He turned around and walked out of his office to the intensive care unit outside. Gun Yanji sat on the sofa and stared blankly at a cup of hot water. She looked up to see Hua Xiaoheng come out. Gun Yanji looked up, her dark, glassy eyes wet. She said pitifully, Hua Xiao, I'm hungry. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. He was originally worried, but seeing her like a little kitten begging for food, all his unease disappeared. Food was the most important thing in the world. Let's go to my place. Hua Xiaoheng walked to Gun Yanji and helped her stand. I'm fine. I can walk by myself. Gun Yanji didn't want him to help her. She wasn't injured, so why was she pretending to be sick? Hua Xiaoheng gave her a sidelong glance. Aren't you hungry? You can still walk? Okay, that was true. Gun Yanji stopped struggling and obediently allowed Hua Xiaoheng to help her back to his official residence. On the way there, Hua Xiaoheng called the kitchen to prepare food for her. The official residence's kitchen was stocked with all kinds of ingredients all year round, and all kinds of broth were constantly simmering. Hearing that Gun Yanji hadn't eaten for a day and night, the orderly in the kitchen gave her a bowl of chicken soup with silver thread noodles made from Rehmannia. The Rehmannia chose free-range hens that were less than a year old and had been simmered in a slow cooker for an entire day. The oil had been skimmed off, and even the chicken had melted in the soup. 2 handfuls of green vegetables, some bean sprouts, and some salt were put in a small white porcelain bowl. Gun Yanji smelled the chicken soup as soon as she entered. Following the smell, she ran to the dining room first. Hua Xiaoheng followed her in and saw that Gun Yanji was already holding a small bowl of silver thread noodles. Her eyes were squinted as she ate, so he was relieved to return to his room. His room was on the 2nd floor. It was a suite that was connected to the study, office, bedroom, and living room. After entering, he immediately turned on the computer to receive the work report sent by the Secret Service personnel. After the meeting, the 4 Secret Service personnel summarized the situation during this period and wrote a detailed report. Hua Xiaoheng opened the email and read it attentively. The report wasn't long, only 3 pages, but Hua Xiaoheng read it for a full 15 minutes. The report detailed the various situations around Gun Yanji over the past few days. Aside from the daily trivial matters, there were a few things that made Hua Xiaoheng vigilant. For example, the time she was almost hit by a bicycle on campus. Also, there were some strangers who appeared around Gun Yanji recently. They didn't do anything out of line, but as long as Gun Yanji appeared on campus, these people would follow her inconspicuously. When it came to secretly following people, if the Special Operations Forces claimed to be second best, no one would claim to be first. These people's actions couldn't be seen by ordinary people. Even Gun Yanji didn't notice that there were people spying on her. But to the Secret Service personnel of the Special Operations Forces, it was nothing. It was just that these people really only paid attention to Gun Yanji and didn't do anything at all. Therefore, the Special Operations Forces personnel only watched them and didn't expose their own whereabouts. And in the past few days, these people had disappeared from the B University campus and hadn't come back since. Therefore, they weren't sure if they were targeting Gun Yanji. The Secret Service personnel of the Special Operations Forces were preparing to report these situations to Hua Xiaoheng at the next regular meeting, but this situation happened to Gun Yanji. They usually had a regular meeting every 15 days. Hua Xiaoheng and his subordinates had the same intuition that these people weren't simple. But why didn't they do anything? It seemed like they were only secretly observing. Could it be that they were being paranoid? Hua Xiaoheng fell into deep thought. Gun Yanji finished a bowl of fragrant chicken soup with silver thread noodles and instantly felt her vitality return. She wiped her mouth and returned to her room on the 2nd floor to take a shower. Lying in bed for a day and a night, she also had a high fever. She felt like she was rotten. But Hua Xiaoheng didn't look disgusted at all. Gun Yanji sat in the bathtub and took a bubble bath. She thought about Hua Xiaoheng's deep and magnetic voice when he sang Flying Bugs to her before she fell asleep yesterday. Oh my! It was so beautiful. Why was she so smart yesterday? She really wanted to give herself a thumbs up. She remembered that when she first started working for Hua Xiaoheng, he used to make her some nursery rhymes. When he wasn't home, Gun Yanji could listen to them and hypnotize herself. Out of so many nursery rhymes, Gun Yanji only remembered Flying Bugs because the melody was very beautiful, but the lyrics didn't sound like a nursery rhyme. She had cursed it when she was young, so she remembered it clearly. Now that she thought about it, Hua Xiaoheng probably became familiar with it at that time, so he could sing it. Even soldiers could sing. Gun Yanji had a deep understanding of this. Military songs were loud and clear. It wasn't a simple phrase. However, Hua Xiaoheng had never sung before. At least, Gu Nianji had never heard him sing before. This time she used her injury as an excuse to ask, and it actually worked. Gu Nianji was a bit regretful that she had recovered so quickly. Otherwise she could have asked him to sing again. She let her imagination run wild in the bathtub, and before she knew it, the water in the bathtub was about to turn cold. Hua Xiaoheng was already knocking on the bathroom door. "Nianji, are you done?" Gu Nianji snapped back to reality and quickly stood up from the bathtub. She turned on the shower and rinsed before coming out with a towel wrapped around her. As soon as she opened the bathroom door, Gu Nianji looked at Hua Xiaoheng like she had never seen him before. Hua Xiaoheng felt a bit uncomfortable under her gaze. "What's wrong?" Gu Nianji rolled her eyes and put her hand on her waist. "Hua Xiao, my bones still hurt. Still hurt." Hua Xiaoheng actually looked relieved. "Then it's not healed yet?" Gu Nianji was speechless. She continued, "Yes, it still hurts. If I can't sleep later, can Hua Xiao sing me another lullaby?" Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. "Are you going to kiss, hug and raise me up high?" Hua Xiaoheng looked at her coldly and folded his hands behind his back. He was unmoved and saw through her trick. He wouldn't sing that kind of song again. Gu Nianji rubbed her nose awkwardly. "That's not necessary." When she walked back to the bedroom, Hua Xiaoheng had already put the Secret Service personnel's work report on her desk. "Look at this material and think about whether there have been any unusual people around you recently. This is the first update. It's a new month and the guaranteed monthly votes have been dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. At 1 p.m., the monthly votes for June will be increased by 5,400. At 7 p.m., the third update. P.S. Dear friends, you were amazing yesterday. Thank you for your monthly votes. Thank you to Momo Moshi and Manling for their 10,000 Chidian coins each yesterday. Moi." Chapter 929. Gu Nianji dried her hair with a towel and glanced sideways at Hua Xiaoheng. She asked in confusion, "Abnormal person? What do you mean?" Hua Xiaoheng crossed his arms and leaned against the edge of Gu Nianji's desk. He explained to her what had happened recently. "From the feedback from your security personnel, your fall this time was a bit strange." "Strange?" Gu Nianji was even more surprised. It was just a slippery road on a snowy day. How could it be strange? At least she didn't feel like someone was deliberately trying to harm her. The sanitation worker who fell and avoided the snow plow to avoid hitting the sanitation worker. Gu Nianji also avoided the snow plow and accidentally brushed against a piece of floating ice. This kind of thing was normal on a snowy day. Hua Xiaoheng shook his head. "We're not very sure either, so it's just a suspicion. Take a look at this material and tell me if there's a problem." Hua Xiaoheng left after speaking, leaving Gu Nianji alone in the room. Gu Nianji picked up the hairdryer and dried her hair as she quickly read the material. The material wasn't long, only 3 pages, but it was very informative. Gu Nianji knew that she had security personnel around her, but she was still a bit surprised to see that her daily activities were clearly observed. She silently read through the entire document, and her brows furrowed. Hua Xiaoheng was right. There really was something fishy. If it weren't for these people secretly observing her, it wouldn't have been easy to find clues. Gu Nianji recalled the last 2 accidents. The first was the bicycle. There were no suspicious people on the road at the time. She clearly saw 2 groups of people walking from both ends of the road. When she passed between them, no one deliberately pushed her. The accident could almost be described as, when the conditions are right, success will follow. Later she was saved by a young man on a skateboard. It was an accident because that person turned out to be her security personnel. And this time the accident that seriously injured her tailbone was the same. A series of seemingly unrelated events finally led to her injury. According to the situation described in the material, if her security personnel hadn't stepped in and sat her down, the back of her head would have hit the rock garden. Gu Nianji knew very well how important the back of the brain was to the human body. If something really happened to that part of her body, she would be a cripple even if she lived. If Gu Nianji's previous bicycle incident could be described as an accident, then this snowy fall could be described as intentional murder. But if it was really murder, then the mastermind was too powerful. It was as if he hadn't made a move at all and had only cleverly made use of some unexpected events to lead to the final result. Gu Nianji rubbed her knees with lingering fear. Who could be so powerful? What method did he use to make use of this chain of events to achieve this result? Naturally, Gu Nianji also thought of the word probability. Her computer skills were very solid, and she didn't just know how to apply them. In order to master computer science, one must not be bad at mathematics. Gu Nianji's mathematics was completely self-taught in the Special Operations Forces base. However, from the age of 13, it only took her 2 years to learn all the mathematics subjects by herself, including advanced mathematics such as calculus during her university days. Probability was a mathematical concept and an important part of statistics. She was no stranger. When she realized that these seemingly scattered events could actually achieve an unexpected result when combined, Gu Nianji subconsciously wanted to calculate the probability of various events happening. In statistical terms, it was the probability of various events happening. Then, she used a formula or algorithm to link the probability of these different events happening and calculated under what circumstances which events could happen in a coherent manner. When they happened in a coherent manner, what would be the result? Gu Nianji was fascinated by her own thinking. She didn't care that her hair was still wet and immediately turned on the computer in the house. She opened the program and began to write a computer program to calculate. At that moment, in a small building in the Yu Mountain Villa district, Ishihara and his grandson were sitting opposite each other and drinking. There was a short long table in front of each of them. It was filled with Japanese snacks, fruits and sake. Ishihara Taro knelt behind the long table and raised his glass to the old man. "Grandfather, Gu Nianji can escape this time, but she won't be able to escape next time. Don't worry, when we find the hospital she's staying in, I will have an even more powerful backup waiting for her." The old man was full of smiles and said emotionally, "Taro, you were really too powerful this time. Is Gu Nianji's injury very serious?" Although she didn't die immediately, it was said that she was seriously injured and was dragged away by an ambulance. Many people saw it with their own eyes. It was said that her tailbone was severely damaged and she couldn't move. She was tied up with a belt on the stretcher in the ambulance. There were photos as proof. Ishihara Taro said proudly, "I calculated the reaction force she received at that time. It was almost enough to make her entire spine pop out of her body. A serious spinal dislocation and a serious bone fracture will make her spend the rest of her life in a hospital bed." They had already skillfully killed a person in the hospital. It was too easy to kill a paraplegic like Gu Nianji. The old man obviously thought so too and praised Ishihara Taro. "Taro, if your father was still alive, I don't know how happy he would be. Grandfather, you're too kind. I spent 5 years to figure out the pattern and came up with a preliminary algorithm. There's still a long way to go," Ishihara Taro said sincerely. "But I will come up with an algorithm that will never be wrong as soon as possible. That way we can use it to do more things." If he could find all the mistakes, they wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. The problem with his algorithm was that it couldn't cover everything, so it worked sometimes. This wasn't a big problem when it came to dealing with people because if it failed, they could just try again. As long as they succeeded once and killed the other party, everything would be fine. But it couldn't be used in other areas such as the stock market. That was because even if they succeeded 99 times, as long as they failed once, they could very well go bankrupt. Therefore, at the moment, his algorithm was not enough to create real wealth for the company. He could only help the company clear the obstacles first before he could fight for precious time and funds for his research to perfect his algorithm. He had to have zero tolerance for mistakes. Huo Xiaoheng was in his room dealing with work. He lost track of time when he was busy. He raised his wrist to look at his watch. It was already 5 in the afternoon. It was time for dinner. It should have been 7 or 8 hours since he brought Gu Nianji back in the morning, right? Gu Nianji hadn't come to look for him even once. Huo Xiaoheng was a bit puzzled. He turned off the computer and stood up from his desk. Huo Xiaoheng first turned on the intercom to call the orderly. "Did Miss Gu go out today?" Huo Xiaoheng asked. The orderly quickly replied, "No, Huo Xiao, Miss Gu didn't even eat lunch." Huo Xiaoheng froze. He often forgot to eat lunch, but Gu Nianji rarely did. What was going on? Huo Xiaoheng strode out of his room and went to Gu Nianji's room across the street. Opening the door to Gu Nianji's bedroom, Huo Xiaoheng saw Gu Nianji sitting in front of the computer and staring intently at the screen. The computer flashed with a blue light, and a series of numbers and symbols jumped on the screen. Gu Nianji's delicate fingers quickly typed out a long formula. She seemed to be calculating. It was the second update, and the monthly votes had been delivered at 5,400 plus updates. The guaranteed monthly votes had been dropped, so you can vote now, dear friends. It was the third update at 7 p.m. P.S. Although the melody of the song Flying Bugs sounded like a children's song, the lyrics weren't children's songs at all, because it was used to coax big babies to sleep, not little babies, you guys understand. Chapter 930. What are you calculating? Hua Xiaoheng leaned over and placed one hand on the back of Gu Nianji's chair and the other on the desk in front of her. Gu Nianji was immersed in the world of mathematics and didn't hear what Hua Xiaoheng said at all. Hua Xiaoheng didn't mind either. His eyes stopped on the iPad next to the desk. The page on the iPad was called Chaos Mathematics. Looking at the formulas and programs Gu Nianji was calculating, Hua Xiaoheng felt like he understood something. He silently took the iPad and sat on the sofa next to Gu Nianji to start reading. Gu Nianji worked hard and used almost 10 hours to finally come up with a preliminary calculation formula. Hua Xiao, when did you get here? Gu Nianji touched the back of her stiff neck and was surprised to see Hua Xiaoheng sitting next to her. He was supporting his head with his hand and looking at the iPad on his knee. Hua Xiaoheng looked up and glanced at the computer screen. I just got here not long ago. He asked her again, what are you calculating? Gu Nianji immediately became happy and said excitedly, I'm using chaos mathematics to calculate probability. Brother Zhe taught me before, but he uses chaos mathematics to make artificial intelligence programs. I think I can borrow it to try. As she spoke, she pointed to the formulas and data on the computer and explained one by one. Look, I first assumed that these events happened by chance and were not the result of human intervention. So I categorized the events listed on the materials and estimated the probability. Then I found a suitable algorithm to loop them in and see what the result would be. What result? Hua Xiaoheng was also a little interested. If this algorithm could be used, it would save a lot of trouble. The result is that the probability of these events happening is the highest among all random events. Hua Xiaoheng said. Explain clearly. Let me put it this way. In theory, as long as it is not deliberately arranged, then the probability of everything happening should be random. There is no such possibility that it will happen. But from the results of my calculations, in order to achieve the final result, such as the result of the most recent fall, the probability of the series of events happening before was the highest. Isn't that obvious? Hua Xiaoheng was confused. If the probability wasn't the highest, it wouldn't have happened. Yes. Gu Nianji laughed. That's true, but one thing can be explained this way, but if all the connected events are the ones with the highest probability, then it's not a coincidence. Hua Xiaoheng understood a little and looked at Gu Nianji thoughtfully. You mean these incidents were deliberately selected? However, who could be so powerful as to be able to pick out the highest probability among thousands of complicated events and link them together? How are they connected? That's right, this is actually the opponent's weakness. This proves that these events are fake randomness. Gu Nianji raised her chin proudly, revealing her slender, swan-like neck. Hua Xiaoheng was mesmerized by Gu Nianji's high spirits. Ever since the incident in Germany, how long had it been since he had seen Gu Nianji this proud and lively? This was his Nianji. Hua Xiaoheng smiled. Seeing that Gu Nianji had finally gotten over the knot in her heart and was able to once again display her charm and ability, he sighed softly. His voice was still low and gentle. Fake randomness? How can I prove it? It's very simple. Gu Nianji turned around and picked up the mouse to point at one of her formulas on the computer. Look here, these events with the highest probability are picked out in order. There must be a trigger, which is an opportunity. With this opportunity, the subsequent events will naturally happen. Hua Xiaoheng sat up straight, his eyes never leaving Gu Nianji's beautiful and confident face. So what you're saying is that this opportunity isn't random but man-made. All right. Gu Nianji couldn't help clapping for Hua Xiaoheng. It was so easy talking to smart people. Hua Xiaoheng leaned back on the sofa and thought. Then how can we find this man-made opportunity? Have you thought about it? Gu Nianji nodded. Of course I have. I want to prove whether my theory and algorithm are correct, so I must find this opportunity that will trigger the subsequent events. How do I find it? Hua Xiao, you'll help me, right? Gu Nianji walked over and sat cross-legged on the carpet in front of the sofa. She leaned against Hua Xiaoheng's leg and looked up at him with a smile. Help me find this opportunity, right? How do you want me to help you? Gu Nianji pushed his leg. Can you get the surveillance footage of those places? Hua Xiaoheng pinched her delicate little nose. Okay, I'll go look for it. Gu Nianji rubbed against his leg happily. Go. The sooner the better. Hua Xiaoheng let her go down for dinner and returned to his office to give Yin Shixiang an order to get the surveillance footage of those two places from B University. Yin Shixiang accepted the order and left. Hua Xiaoheng casually opened the surveillance footage of the hospital where Gu Yinran's father was hospitalized. He had already obtained it a long time ago. Hua Xiaoheng had never believed that Gu Yinran's father's death was an accident. However, there was no evidence. Therefore, he retrieved the surveillance footage from that day and watched it repeatedly. However, he couldn't find any traces of a man-made attack. In Gu Yanran's father's ward, no matter how he looked at it, no matter how fast or slow, it showed that it was an accident. No one tried to take advantage of the situation to kill him. However, after reading the introduction to chaos mathematics and talking to Gu Nianji, Huo Xiaoheng suddenly had a different idea. Because Gu Yanran's father had always been under surveillance, they originally wanted to keep him alive to catch the big fish. In the end, they didn't catch the big fish and even the bait was destroyed. Huo Xiaoheng didn't know how many times he thought about what happened in the hospital. Therefore, the chaos mathematics and Gu Nianji's theory that he saw today suddenly inspired Huo Xiaoheng. He couldn't help but wonder if that incident was the same as Gu Nianji's accident. Was it actually all fake? He sat in his office and listed the events that happened when Gu Yanran's father died in the hospital. He began to analyze the probability of these events based on Gu Nianji's theory. The results were just as he expected. These events had the highest probability of happening. In order to achieve the result of Gu Yanran's father's death, these events had the highest probability of happening. That made sense. Previously, they had focused on the inside of the ward. What if the opportunity happened outside of the ward? Just like dominoes, in order to topple the dominoes, someone had to do it at least once. Who was the person who pushed the dominoes? Huo Xiaoheng looked at the surveillance footage frame by frame. This time, his focus was on the outside of the ward. He saw the youths who looked like gangsters chatting and laughing in the corridor opposite Gu Yanran's father's ward. He also saw a young nurse pushing a surgical cart over. There was no one else outside the ward. At that moment, his gaze was finally blinded by a golden light. Where did the golden light come from? It was the third watch. The guaranteed monthly votes had dropped. Everyone, you can vote now. Chapter 931. Huo Xiaoheng's slender and powerful fingers paused on the mouse for a moment before continuously clicking the rewind button. After repeating this a few times, he finally discovered where the tiny golden light had come from. The bright golden color wasn't actually that deep, and it only appeared for a very short time. Even if he looked at it frame by frame, most people wouldn't notice it. However, this kind of small detail was not worth mentioning to the Special Operations Forces, who had specially trained their night vision. They hadn't seen it before because they hadn't paid attention to the small details outside the ward. After all, the fight had taken place inside the ward, and what happened outside was just a small interlude. Everyone's habitual thought was that someone had taken advantage of the chaos to commit a crime in the ward. Of course, they later discovered that wasn't the case. The surveillance footage in the ward showed that it really was an accident, and the key person who stepped on the power cord was the doctor who had tried to stop the fight. They had also investigated the doctor countless times, and there was no motive or suspicion at all. When Gu Nianji's thoughts broke Huo Xiaoheng's habitual thought process, his focus immediately shifted from inside the ward to outside. Like dominoes, they used to focus on the last few dominoes, but the cause was actually an external force hitting the first domino. Huo Xiaoheng's gaze lingered on the flash of golden light. His fingers clicked on the mouse and he gradually enlarged the golden light. Finally, he discovered that the golden light wasn't anything else, but a tiny gold coin. It was a very pure gold, just like the color of gold. For thousands of years, gold status as a unique item of equivalent exchange had almost become a conditioned reflex in the human mind. Whenever someone discovered something golden, they would involuntarily look at it. It was this gold coin that suddenly rolled diagonally to the bottom of the video that caused the subsequent series of events. Was this coin the opportunity? No. Huo Xiaoheng shook his head. It should be the person who tossed the coin that was the real trigger, the opportunity. However, no matter how he played the video, he couldn't see the person who tossed the coin. It seemed that the person had done his homework. He cleverly chose the camera's blind spot and stood there to toss a coin. Since then, he had changed many people's lives. Huo Xiaoheng watched the video silently and cut that part. Gu Nianji waited downstairs for a long time, but Huo Xiaoheng didn't come down for dinner. She was hungry, but she refused to eat alone. The orderly came over several times and finally couldn't take it anymore. He went upstairs and knocked on Huo Xiaoheng's door. "Chief, Miss Gu is waiting for you for dinner." Huo Xiaoheng froze and said into the intercom, "Let her eat first." "We told her, but Miss Gu refused. She's still waiting." The orderly outside the door scratched his head helplessly. Huo Xiaoheng glanced at the files on the computer. It was almost done, so he logged out and turned off the computer. Standing up, he said, "I'll be right down." The orderly laughed and said happily, "Yes, Chief." He quickly went downstairs and said to Gunyenji, "The chief will be coming down soon. Do you want the food served?" Gunyenji quickly nodded. "Hurry up, I'm going to faint from hunger." As soon as Hua Xiaoheng walked into the dining room, he took off his military cap and hung it on the wall hook as he said, "Eat if you're hungry. Why are you being so polite with me?" Gunyenji blinked. "If I didn't do that, would you have come down for dinner?" She had long known that the only way to deal with people like Hua Xiaoheng was to use the tactic of, "I won't eat if you don't eat." Otherwise, Chief Hua, who was so busy every day, could really only eat one meal every 3 days and drink dew from the wind and become an immortal. Or is it my fault? Hua Xiaoheng wasn't angry at all after being set up by Gunyenji. His expression was very gentle. However, the orderlies standing next to him were already used to it. They would always ask for Miss Gu's help if they couldn't handle something. The chief could indeed save on food when he worked, and the orderlies were also very desperate. The dishes were all served. Hua Xiaoheng waved his hand and dismissed the orderlies. There were only him and Gunyenji in the dining room. The crystal chandelier above the long dining table fell and illuminated the room. Hua Xiaoheng looked at the scene and felt like it was a lifetime ago. Gunyenji cocked her head and used the knife to cut the steak. She didn't even look up as she said, "Of course it's not your fault. It's my fault. I shouldn't have threatened and bribed Chief Hua." Her words were pleasant to hear, but there was no hint of apology. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at her and leaned over to whisper in her ear, "When did you bribe him? Why didn't I know about it?" "I wouldn't dare. I was just saying. Don't take it seriously." Gunyenji curled her lips and raised her glass of juice. "Hua Xiao, here, let me toast you." "I don't drink." Hua Xiaoheng didn't play along. He looked down and carefully cut the steak in front of him as he said, "When Big Xiong gets the B University surveillance, let's watch it together?" Gunyenji nodded and took a big sip of coconut juice. This was her favorite juice at this stage of her life. She liked mango juice when she was young, but later discovered it wasn't good for her teeth, so she only drank orange juice and watermelon juice. Now she was addicted to coconut juice. Hua Xiaoheng always had coconut juice at his place and it was fresh. They didn't speak anymore and finished dinner in silence. The orderlies saw that they had finished eating and came in to clear the table. They also gave each of them a cup of tea. Gunyenji wanted Biluakun tea, and Hua Xiaoheng wanted Piu, tea. Yin Shixiang returned from B University before they finished their cups of tea. "Hua Xiao and Yenji, did you just finish dinner?" "I haven't eaten yet." He didn't stand on ceremony and sat down casually. "What are we eating tonight?" "I can eat a whole cow." Yin Shixiang looked at the orderlies and asked. The orderlies was a new recruit this year. He smiled and said, "Perfect, we're having steak today. How do you want it, Colonel Yin?" "Medium well." Yin Shixiang snapped his fingers and turned to look at Gunyenji and Hua Xiaoheng. "You've already finished eating? Don't you want some dessert?" Gunyenji shook her head and rushed him. "Brother Xiong, hurry up. I can't wait." Hua Xiaoheng stood up. "Yenji, let's go up first. Big Xiong, come up after you're done." "Okay." Yin Shixiang waved his hand. "Please help yourselves. I'm a fast eater." Gunyenji also stood up and giggled at Yin Shixiang. "Brother Xiong, don't eat so fast. Be careful not to choke." Yin Shixiang glared at her, but Gunyenji had already turned around and followed Hua Xiaoheng with light steps. Yin Shixiang looked at their harmonious backs as they walked side by side and suddenly smiled. He scratched his head and took out his phone to send a message to Ma Chichi. "Kiss Brother Xiong." Chichi, Yenji and Hua Xiao seemed to have reconciled. After sending the message, he put away his phone and started wolfing down his food. Hua Xiaoheng took Gunyenji to his room on the second floor and had her sit behind his desk. He showed Gunyenji the surveillance video from the hospital. "Yenji, take a look. Is there a trigger in this video?" Gunyenji could immediately tell that this was the hospital where Gu Yenran's father passed away. "There's a problem with this too? Could it be that he didn't pass away due to bad luck?" Gunyenji curiously opened the surveillance video and began to watch it from the beginning. Hua Xiaoheng sat next to her and watched the surveillance video with her. At the spot where Hua Xiaoheng found the golden light, Gunyenji also pressed pause and murmured, "What is this?" Her slender and soft fingers clicked on the mouse and quickly zoomed in on the target. "A gold coin? Am I seeing things? This is a murder case caused by a gold coin?" Gunyenji laughed. Hua Xiaoheng nodded. "Look, ever since this gold coin appeared, the behavior of the person behind it changed. It's developing in the direction of killing Gu Yenran's father." Gunyenji dragged the progress bar of the surveillance video but realized that no matter how long she dragged, she couldn't see the person who threw the gold coin. "You can't see it?" This person must have investigated the location of the surveillance cameras in the hospital, so he just happened to be standing in the camera's blind spot. Huo Xiaoheng leaned back in his seat and raised his arms to cover the back of his head. His long legs crossed leisurely, and his entire being was very relaxed. Gu Nianji pouted and rested her chin on her hand. She slowly watched the surveillance video and said calmly, "If this person hiding in the camera's blind spot is the person who threw the gold coin, then you can see that he's very arrogant and thinks he's God. God threw dice to create the world, and this person threw a coin to control other people's lives just to enjoy the fun of being able to do whatever he wants." Huo Xiaoheng nodded slowly. That makes sense. The person who can think of this method to kill is not only arrogant but also paranoid. As the two of them spoke, Yin Shixiang quickly came up and handed the surveillance video he brought back from B University to Huo Xiaoheng. Huo Xiaoheng took the USB and inserted it into the computer to watch with Gu Nianji and Yin Shixiang. The first surveillance video was of the place where Gu Nianji was almost hit by a bicycle. The surveillance video of that place was on a telephone pole not far away. It wasn't directly facing the small road where the accident happened, so the view was a bit off. But even so, the three of them simultaneously saw a small gold coin rolling into the camera from a certain direction. Gu Nianji immediately pressed pause and glanced at Huo Xiaoheng. "It's actually a gold coin." Huo Xiaoheng patted her shoulder comfortingly. "It's okay. Keep watching." He had a hunch that these cases were related. This small gold coin was finally able to connect them. But just like the hospital surveillance, this video also didn't capture the person who threw the coin. So the person who threw the gold coin once again chose the camera's blind spot. But when Gu Nianji looked at the angle and direction the coin rolled from, she silently recalled the scene at the time. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately remembered the handsome young man in the black double-breasted uniform. If she remembered correctly, the young man had been standing in the same direction as the coin had rolled from. Huo Xiaoheng had already started playing the second surveillance video. It was the place where Gu Nianji almost fell to the ground and became paralyzed. In the surveillance video, snowflakes danced and the snow on the ground began to thicken. The light from the snow was a bit blinding. There weren't many people on the road, so the snow on the ground was clearly captured. So when the small gold coin appeared on the snow, Gu Nianji didn't hesitate to press pause. "There's no need to watch anymore. It's definitely the same person," Gu Nianji said quietly. "This is the first update. It's a new month and the guaranteed monthly votes have already dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. Today is Monday and Monday's recommended votes are especially important. At 1 p.m., the June monthly votes will be 5,700 plus updates. All the June monthly votes and updates will be paid off. At 7 p.m. the third update." Chapter 932. When they saw the same gold coin in 3 different surveillance videos, the natural conclusion was that the trigger that triggered the chain of events was the same person. Gu Nianji's eyes flashed, but she didn't mention the handsome young man in the black double-breasted uniform. Yin Shixiang was extremely regretful. "Why didn't we get this person? What a pity." Gu Nianji shook her head and turned around on Huo Xiaoheng's swivel chair. Crossing her hands in front of her chest, she looked up at the 2 tall men in front of her and said calmly, "Actually, legally speaking, it doesn't make a difference whether we got it or not. I'd like to hear the details." Yin Shixiang pretended to be listening attentively. Huo Xiaoheng also looked at her attentively. Gu Nianji held the mouse and pointed at the static gold coin on the screen. "Because this person didn't do anything, he only threw a gold coin. What can you do to him?" Huo Xiaoheng was speechless. "What crime? Casually throwing trash? Legally speaking, a gold coin isn't trash, it's something valuable." Gu Nianji sighed. "The other party is very smart. He even calculated that even if we found out, we wouldn't be able to do anything. No court would accept their theory. In fact, from a legal point of view, these algorithms were only auxiliary. They could help solve cases, but they were useless for filing a case and convicting someone. That's too much." Yin Shixiang clenched his fists angrily and punched them hard. "This is a clear provocation. It was an arrogant, 'I did it, what can you do about it?' So Gu Nianji didn't mention the young man in black. What was the use of saying it? Huo Xiao would definitely investigate, but wouldn't Huo Xiao violate the rules if he did this when the other party didn't break the law? Gu Nianji knew that because the Special Operations Forces had too much power, the Senate and Cabinet were very wary of the Special Operations Forces' actions within the country. She didn't want to cause trouble for him, and she also didn't want to be a hindrance to his career. Gu Nianji had her own ideas about this person. That person's target was her, so he would definitely appear by her side again. If she remembered correctly, she seemed to have met him at the library entrance that day. Hua Xiaoheng folded his hands behind his back and looked at the light gold velvet floor-to-ceiling curtains. He said calmly, "Their target is Nianji. As long as Nianji is fine, they will continue. So, don't worry, they will definitely give themselves away." Gu Nianji, right? It was the same as what she thought, so she couldn't say it out loud. Gu Nianji returned to her bedroom thoughtfully and sat on the sofa in a daze. The algorithm formula just now lingered in her mind. Something was itching to try, wanting to jump out and express itself. She clutched her wildly beating heart, curled her lips and said softly, "If the law can't punish you, then let's have a fair competition and see whose algorithm is better." Gu Nianji knew her idea was crazy, but if the other party really wanted to kill her silently and didn't have to bear any legal responsibility, she was sorry, but she couldn't take it lying down. She didn't want to sit around and wait for her death. She didn't want to wait for the other party to set another trap for her. She could only escape under the protection of others. Because when the other party triggered the domino effect again, it would be even tighter and more intense than this time. At that time, even if Hua Xiaoheng could send people to secretly protect her, it would only be a life for a life. Gu Nianji didn't want anyone on her side to sacrifice themselves, especially for her. She was very grateful for this kind of act of using their lives to protect her, but she also felt that it was very heavy and suffocating. Moreover, she also had accumulated anger in her heart and wanted to vent it. Everyone only had one life. What right did that person have to think that he was superior and had the ability to transcend the law and dictate the life and death of others? If he wanted to be God, he had to see if he had the ability to do so. Gu Nianji thought about this and sleepwalked to her desk. She turned on the computer and began a series of calculations. Late at night, Hua Xiaoheng's work for the day temporarily came to an end. He turned off the computer and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He walked around the office twice to relax his muscles before going to Gu Nianji's room. Gu Nianji was typing on the computer and seemed to be calculating. But this time, Gu Nianji turned off the computer as soon as Hua Xiaoheng walked in. She turned around uncomfortably and forced a smile at Hua Xiaoheng. "Hua Xiao, why aren't you asleep yet? I should be asking you that." Hua Xiaoheng walked behind her. "Why did you turn off the computer as soon as I came in?" Gu Nianji didn't know how to answer and muttered, "That's my privacy." Hua Xiaoheng raised his brows. "Privacy? You? Of course I have privacy." Gu Nianji turned around and saw Hua Xiaoheng's meaningful gaze. She suddenly became angry from embarrassment and stood up. "You have to respect my privacy. I'm going to sleep now. Please go back." Hua Xiaoheng curled his lips and put his hands in his trouser pockets. His sharp and deep gaze slowly looked her up and down. Gu Nianji suddenly felt like she was naked in front of Hua Xiaoheng. Seeing that Gu Nianji was about to explode, Hua Xiaoheng finally withdrew his gaze and patted her head. "Okay, I respect your privacy. Go to sleep." With that, he turned around and left Gu Nianji's bedroom. He left so quickly that Gu Nianji was confused, but she didn't chase after him. She stood in the middle of the bedroom with a frown and watched Hua Xiaoheng's figure disappear outside the door. She quickly locked the bedroom door, then slipped onto the bed and continued her calculations on her phone. The phone wasn't as powerful as a computer, but her algorithms didn't need too much memory. After optimization, the phone's core could also handle it. Gu Nianji hid under the covers and tinkered with all kinds of permutations. She didn't even know when she fell asleep. When she woke up the next day, she found that the phone was completely out of battery. She only stayed in Hua Xiaoheng's official residence for a day. When she woke up that morning, she pestered Hua Xiaoheng to go back to school. Hua Xiaoheng still had a few meetings after breakfast. It was almost the end of the year and they were also very busy. Unable to resist Gu Nianji's pestering, Hua Xiaoheng finally agreed with a headache. However, he made her promise that she couldn't leave the Secret Service's sight. Gu Nianji blinked her large, glassy eyes and said very sincerely, "Hua Xiao, it's almost the new year. You should think about how to celebrate it. I can graduate before the new year. Will you come to the graduation ceremony?" As soon as she said that, Hua Xiaoheng's mind turned to Gu Nianji's post-graduation matters. He patted her head. "Study hard and take a break for 6 months after graduation." Gu Nianji smiled and didn't comment. She waved at him and called He Jichu to ask him to pick her up and take her back to school. Hua Xiaoheng was a bit distracted during the meeting, but he only came back to his senses when it was lunchtime. He had actually been tricked by Gu Nianji. She didn't answer his questions directly at all. Instead, she changed the topic to graduation and completely diverted his attention. Hua Xiaoheng understood and chuckled. He continued the meeting after lunch. Hijichu drove to pick up Gunyenji. She was waiting for him outside the yellow line at the entrance of the Special Operations Forces. As soon as the car arrived, Gunyenji got in and said, "Professor He, can you take me back to the house I bought first? Aren't you going back to school?" Hijichu didn't understand. Gunyenji paused and smiled. "Yes, but for the last 3 weeks, I want to be a day student and live in my house in Hipingli." It was the second update. The June monthly tickets had arrived at 5,700 plus updates. The guaranteed monthly tickets had been dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. Today was Monday and recommendation tickets were also very important. It was the third update at 7 p.m. Chapter 933. You're going to graduate soon and you're so busy. Why are you still attending day school? Hijichu looked at Gunyenji, or are you up to something? Gunyenji turned to look at the scenery outside the car window and replied calmly, "Why would I? Professor He, you're overthinking things." Hijichu snorted and quickly drove onto the highway to Hipingli as he said slowly, "Nyenji, your ears move involuntarily when you're nervous." "What do you mean?" Gunyenji instinctively touched her ears. "You're still denying it? You've exposed yourself, haven't you? Why would you touch your ears if you're not guilty?" Hijichu saw through Gunyenji's pretense. Gunyenji laughed mischievously, "I'm trying to prove that my ears didn't move and refute Professor He's claims. What are you thinking?" Hijichu glanced at her, his shimmering, sultry eyes flashing. "That's good." He then continued to persuade her, "No matter what you're thinking, you have to wait until after you graduate. You only have 3 weeks left, you don't want to fail at the last step, right?" Gunyenji nodded repeatedly, "I know, Professor He. Don't worry, I'm going back to my own house for the convenience of studying." "Stop bullshitting." Hijichu refused to believe her lame excuse. If it's for the convenience of studying, the school dormitory is the most convenient. If you're afraid of disturbing your roommates, you're living in a room alone, so there's no problem. Gunyenji sighed, "The older, the wiser. I can't argue with you, so let's go back to school." "That's more like it." Hijichu turned the steering wheel and got off the highway to head towards B University. After driving for a while, Hijichu said dryly, "The older, the wiser? Am I that old?" She didn't expect Hijichu to care about age. Gunyenji blinked and quickly said, "You're not a ginger, I wasn't talking about you." Hijichu gripped the steering wheel tightly and said pointedly, "I'm the same age as Wuxia." Gunyenji was embarrassed and awkwardly turned on the car's audio and visual system and changed the topic. "Are there any good radio stations these days?" Hijichu didn't say anything and let her change the channel herself. Soon, they arrived at the B University female graduate student dormitory. Hijichu dropped her off at the entrance and said, "Next time if you're late at the library, remember to call me. I'll pick you up." Gunyenji quickly pressed her palms together. "Thank you, Professor He. Thank you, Professor He." Hijichu waved his hand. "Study hard. There are only 3 weeks left." His expression when he said this was almost identical to Huo Xiaoheng's. Gunyenji nodded sheepishly and watched Hijichu's car leave. Just as she was about to turn around and enter the dormitory building, she saw the black-shirted young man she had seen before standing beside the dormitory building door, talking to a girl. The girl's fair face blushed as she raised her head to look at the youth. Her eyes revealed an infatuated expression. Gunyenji, she wasn't interested in romance, but because the girl was also from the law faculty and seemed to be a third-year master's student, she took a few more glances at her. As expected, the black-robed youth looked over. His nose was as straight as a mountain peak, and his face was too pale, giving him a weak sense of beauty. He looked at Gunyenji with a gentle and polite expression, but there was an indescribable sense of arrogance in the depths of his eyes. Gunyenji retracted her gaze and deliberately acted as if she didn't know the person at all. She directly entered the building. The black-shirted young man was Ishihara Taro. Ever since Gunyenji had been taken away by the ambulance, he had mobilized the Ishihara Corporation's power to search for Gunyenji's whereabouts in all the major hospitals in the imperial capital. The strange thing was that Gunyenji seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. He couldn't find her at all. This was really strange. He remembered the time when Gunyenji fell. The reaction force from the fall usually killed or paralyzed her, so he refused to give up and searched everywhere. In the end, it was his grandfather who was worried that he would alert the enemy and make it more difficult for them to be on guard. He ordered them not to move again, so he finally gave up. However, only 2 days later, Gunyenji actually appeared on her own. And she seemed to be completely fine. Ishihara Taro fell into deep thought. Could it be that there was still a problem with his algorithm? Could it be that her fall wasn't as severe as he had expected? Ishihara Taro was in a hurry to go back and verify his algorithm, so he left the school in a hurry. When he returned to his apartment in the imperial capital, he found his grandfather there. "Grandfather, you're not staying in the U Mountain Villa district anymore?" Ishihara Taro asked curiously. Ishihara Taro's grandfather's name was Ishihara Wakashi. He sat on the recliner in the living room by the French windows and said calmly, "I want to stay with you for a few more days. I'll be returning to Japan next month. What about you? Do you want to go back with me?" Ishihara Taro understood what his grandfather meant. "Don't worry, I'll definitely settle this matter before you return to Japan." After saying that, he remembered Gunyenji he had seen today. "Grandfather, Gunyenji returned to school today." Ishihara Wakashi opened his eyes suddenly. Returned to school? She was so badly injured, how could she return to school? Who sent her back? Ishihara Taro was a little ashamed. He gritted his teeth and said, "I don't know if there was a problem with the algorithm, but her injury wasn't as serious as I had expected." Ishihara Wakashi couldn't hide his disappointment. How could this be? After a moment of silence, Ishihara Wakashi said tiredly, "Then prepare well. You can't make a mistake next time." "Yes." Ishihara Taro knelt on the cold marble floor in the living room and kowtowed to Ishihara Wakashi. After Ishihara Wakashi left, Ishihara Taro threw himself into a frenzy of calculations. He didn't even go to class at B University. Machichi was very happy that Gunyenji had returned. She pulled her over and looked her over. She smiled and said, "Thank goodness you're fine. When I heard you were taken away by the ambulance that day, I was so shocked that I called Brother Xiong more than 10 times to ask him if he knew where the ambulance took you. Luckily, Brother Xiong told me not to worry." Gunyenji patted her shoulder. "All right, I know you and Brother Xiong love each other, so stop showing off your affection. My injury looked especially serious, but it was actually nothing. It was just a dislocated ankle. Professor, he was worried for nothing. I went to get an X-ray and reconnected the bone, then I'll be fine." "Dislocated? Then be careful. It'll be very uncomfortable if it becomes a habitual dislocation." Machichi quickly smoothed it out. Everyone knew that Gunyenji had fallen and was taken away by the ambulance, but they couldn't tell how serious it was. After all, no one saw her bleed at the time. They only saw her sit on the ground. Therefore, after the ambulance arrived, there were also people who took the opportunity to mock Gunyenji's condition and say that she was deliberately making a big deal out of it to avoid the final exams. "I'll be careful," Gunyenji said as she stretched. She wouldn't explain her real condition to others. "I'm going to rest for a while. Don't disturb me." I know. Go to sleep. No matter who comes, they won't wake you up." Machichi expressed that she wanted to keep an eye on her. Gunyenji smiled and hugged her before turning to go back to her room. After resting for the whole morning, she started classes in the afternoon. The first 2 days were fine, but the third day was Friday. There was a compulsory law class at 2 in the afternoon. It was the last and most important class, so she had to attend it. After that, she would have exams. The final exams at B University lasted a week, so she actually only had 2 weeks to study. She wished she could use 1 hour as 2. She hurried from the library to the lecture hall and sat down next to Machichi. The lecture hall quickly quieted down. The teacher of the compulsory class walked in leisurely. Behind him was a handsome young man wearing a short gray coat. It was Ishihara Taro. Gunyenji was stunned. This guy was also a B University student? She quickly nudged Machichi. "Who's that?" Machichi looked up. "Oh, that's the Japanese transfer student from our faculty, Ishihara Taro." It was the third period. The guaranteed monthly votes had been dropped. "Dear friends, you can vote now. Today is Monday." Recommendation votes are also very important. Good night, dear friends. Chapter 934. "Oh, he's the transfer student from our faculty?" Gunyenji was shocked. Her already large eyes widened even more, and her pupils, as black as jade, were as dark as the night. Could she have been wrong? Was it just a coincidence that this person appeared at that place? After all, Gunyenji had never seen this youth on the surveillance camera. All the clues were connected because of her preconceived notions. What if she was wrong? Gunyenji was well versed in the law and knew the importance of evidence. She was also willing to give the benefit of the doubt to any incident. In other words, she should believe that the other party did not do such a thing when there was no concrete evidence. Gunyenji quietly looked away and looked at her notes. After the class, Gunyenji and Machichi left the classroom together and went to the library to study. At that moment, Ishihara Taro followed them and called out to them. "Chichi, where are you going?" His voice was a typical baritone. He enunciated clearly, but his pronunciation was a little strange. It was a typical Japanese accent. Machichi turned around in surprise and frowned. "Ishihara, what's the matter?" She had clearly only seen this Ishihara Taro once at the class meeting. What was he trying to do by calling him so intimately? Ishihara Taro had one hand in his semi-long coat pocket and the other holding a folder. His tall and slender figure attracted the attention of many girls. However, his gaze was only on Machichi. "Chichi, I have some homework that I don't understand. Do you have time to help me with it?" His voice was gentle and pleasant, and his posture was handsome and polite. Ishihara Taro was very aware of the power of his appearance. He was like a male peacock, constantly displaying his masculine charm to Machichi. Gunyenji secretly took out her phone and recorded this scene, especially Ishihara Taro. Gunyenji practically used the highest resolution HD camera lens to capture his entire body. However, from Ishihara Taro's point of view, she was very impolite and playing with her phone while others were talking. Although the angle at which she was playing with her phone was a little weird, Ishihara Taro's attitude towards Machichi was unprecedentedly warm as he looked at Machichi coldly from the corner of his eye. Machichi could not take it anymore and the smile on her face froze. "Ishihara, I'm very busy too. It's going to be the final exam soon and I really don't have time. How about this, I'll introduce you to a cram school and you can go to the teacher of the cram school for tutoring, okay?" Gunyenji snickered and twirled her phone lazily. Her dark eyes sparkled like the stars in the night sky. "Chichi, is this the legendary Japanese transfer student with an off-the-charts IQ? If your IQ is off the charts, doesn't that mean your IQ is off the charts? My IQ is even higher than the Milky Way." Machichi was also amused by Gunyenji and pushed her. "Stop joking around. I was just being polite. Don't you know how to be polite? You really thought I was complimenting you?" Machichi glared at Ishihara Taro as she said the word compliment. Ishihara Taro had originally wanted to get her attention by ignoring Gunyenji. He had not expected that she would actually discriminate against the intelligence that he was most proud of. This time he had really poked a hornet's nest. Ishihara Taro's gaze immediately turned to Gunyenji, and he said somewhat stiffly, "Your IQ is off the charts? Doesn't that mean my IQ is off the charts? You wanted to bicker?" Gunyenji felt that this was a very unfair victory. She clicked on her phone again and did not even look at Ishihara Taro in the eye. She said, "Yes, your IQ is off the charts, but you can't even understand the contents of the compulsory courses in the law faculty. You need to consult a girl with an off-the-charts IQ. Chichi, do you feel the thrill of being crushed by your IQ?" IQ had always been the knot in Ishihara Taro's heart when he faced Gunyenji. Ever since he knew that his father had been defeated by Gu Xiangwen, he had been determined to surpass his daughter. Furthermore, he had planned for this scene for many years. Suddenly turning to face Gunyenji, Ishihara Taro laughed coldly. "I graduated with a master's degree at the age of 18, and I'm currently studying for a doctorate at the University of Tokyo. What about you? You're already 19 years old and you haven't even graduated with a master's. How dare you compare IQ with me? You really don't know what you're talking about." Gunyenji was not angry at all. She was still smiling and had a lazy expression on her face. She pointed at Ishihara Taro with the phone in her hand. "Since you've already graduated with a master's degree, why did you come to our school to study for a master's degree again? Isn't it because Japanese universities are not up to standard so you came back to study again?" "My master's degree is not in law." Ishihara Taro looked like he could not take any provocation. Moreover, Gunyenji was the person he had wanted to defeat since he was young, so he took advantage of the fact that he was only 18 years old and said, "Why can't I study for a master's degree in the law faculty? You're being unreasonable." Gunyenji saw that her provocation had worked, so she continued to push Ishihara Taro. "I'm not being reasonable. I'm only talking about the law. Do you understand? Since you can't even understand the compulsory courses in law, I'll give you a piece of advice. Stop studying law and go back to where you came from. If you continue to be arrogant here, someone will teach you a lesson anytime." Gunyenji's sharp tongue trampled on Ishihara Taro, and her mood instantly improved. It had been a long time since she had met someone who came forward to be beaten up by her, even though bullying a little kid seemed like an unfair advantage. Actually, she did not consider that she was only half a year older than Ishihara Taro. Ishihara Taro had been pampered in the Ishihara Corporation since he was young and was treated like a treasure. Also, because his IQ was much higher than the average person's, he had never been bullied like this before. This was the first time he had seen someone speak and suppress him. Although Ishihara Taro was mentally prepared, he was still so angry that he lost all of his poise. He pointed at Gunyenji angrily and shouted, "My master's and doctorate degrees are all in the most cutting-edge chaos mathematics. So what if you know the law? Compete with me in chaos mathematics if you can." Chaos mathematics? Gunyenji's expression changed. She had never expected to hear this term from this Japanese guy's mouth. She had originally wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but now she did not need to. He had already given her the evidence with both hands. Gunyenji suppressed the excitement in her heart and carelessly twirled the diamond earrings on her earlobes. She said nonchalantly, "I'm not even a chaos mathematics major. Why should I compete with you on this ridiculous thing? I really don't know whose backdoor you got into our faculty. Haha, the prestigious B University Faculty of Law also cannot avoid the ways of the world." Ah. Machichi was very happy listening from the side. This Ned Ishihara Taro actually tried to break things up the moment they met. Did he think that her friendship with Nyenji was so easily shaken? Moreover, she had a boyfriend. Why would she want to be intimate with this Japanese guy? He was degrading her. To think that she had praised him in all sorts of ways before. She must have been blind. Machichi made a gesture of stabbing her eyes at Gunyenji and said, "Nyenji, I was wrong. Let's go back to study. We don't need to go to the library anymore." Gunyenji smiled and shook her head. "How can I do that? I have obsessive-compulsive disorder. I'm used to going to the library. I'll feel uncomfortable if I don't. Let's go. If you don't want to go, I can go alone." Machichi looked at Ishihara Taro, who was glaring at them from behind. She muttered, "Why is he so angry? Isn't he a little princess? Who does he want to be supported by? What a drama." Gunyenji pulled her hand. "Then let's go to the library?" "Yeah." Machichi followed Gunyenji obediently and turned to leave. Only Ishihara Taro stood where he was. His light brown eyes gradually turned pitch black. After Gunyenji and Machichi had walked far away, his entourage emerged from hiding and said worriedly, "Young master, won't you attract their attention by saying that?" "I want to attract her attention," Ishihara Taro said proudly. "If she doesn't know that I'm the one scheming against her, how boring would that be? I like to see her hate me to the point where she can't do anything to me." He was very confident that his method was completely outside of the law. Even if they knew it was him, they wouldn't sue him. It was just like a point he had recently learned in law class. He knew that what he had done couldn't be made into a case. In other words, the court couldn't even file a case. What did he do? All he did was throw a coin. Was there a law against throwing coins? Haha, the Ishihara Corporation wasn't a pushover. Even if they knew he was the one who did it, they wouldn't do it in the open. Would the elites of the Tokyo Secret Service be pushovers if they dared to play dirty tricks on him? Then he would see who would dare to use dirty tricks on a foreigner like him. Ishihara Taro was very clear about the deep-rooted bad habits of some Wuxia Empire bureaucrats. They were afraid of offending foreigners. They usually couldn't wait to protect foreigners. How would they dare to use dirty tricks on him? Do you still want your international reputation? Ishihara Taro dared to swagger in front of Gunyenji because he had planned everything from start to finish. Gunyenji and Machichi arrived at the library and found a quiet place to sit down to study. After the small episode just now, Gunyenji couldn't learn anything at all. She looked at the notebook and reference books in front of her, but her thoughts were completely on the words chaos mathematics that Ishihara Taro had just said. It really was that little brat. Why did he do that? Gunyenji couldn't help but take out her phone and secretly change the IP address. She entered her hacking program and searched for the Japanese name, Ishihara Taro. Only a few papers published in the top international mathematics journals were signed with the English translation of this name. She didn't see any other clues. Just like her father, Gu Xiangwen, everything other than academics seemed to have been wiped clean. This is the first update. It's a new month. The guaranteed monthly tickets have dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. At 1 p.m., the monthly tickets for July will increase by 300 updates. At 7 p.m. the third update. P.S. Thank you to Momo Moshi for the 10,000 Chidien coins yesterday. Congratulations to Momo Moshi for becoming the 18th leader of Hello Major General. Thank you to Assistant 9 for tipping 100,000 Chidien coins this morning. Congratulations to Assistant 9, for becoming the 19th Chief of, Hello Major General. On behalf of the Major General Nyenji and Professor He, I would like to express my gratitude for the sudden addition of 2 leaders. Of course there will be updates. Don't worry, Alliance Master. Chapter 935. Gu Nyenji looked at the results of the search and felt slightly unhappy. Ishihara Taro had published articles in those magazines and had a simple resume. Gu Nyenji, who had a photographic memory, noticed that Ishihara Taro's resume reminded her of Gu Xiangwen. When her father, Gu Xiangwen, went to university, received his master's degree and started his PhD, Ishihara Taro would be 1 year younger than him. Gu Nyenji didn't know why she felt this way, but it was uncomfortable to look at. She kept quiet and swiped her finger on her phone to search in another way. This time she used the relevant search engine. The results might not completely match the name Ishihara Taro, but as long as it was related to this name it would be found. In the end, when he searched for it, the first thing that came up was Ishihara Corporation. Gu Nyenji didn't think that this Ishihara Corporation had anything to do with Ishihara Taro at first. To her they were all surnamed Ishihara. For example, if the richest man's surname was Ma and you were also surnamed Ma, did that mean you were related to the richest man? But after searching around there was no more information. She decided to go all out and entered the Japanese website to find the Japanese government's resident ticket system. Japan's resident ticket was similar to the Wuxia Empire's household registration. In fact, it contained even more information than the household registration. It contained the citizen's photo, date of birth, home address, gender, and relationship with the household head. According to Japanese law, before a citizen turned 20, they didn't have an independent household registration. They could only live on the same resident ticket with their elders. The security measures of the Japanese resident ticket system were nothing to Gu Nyenji. She only spent 5 seconds to crack the website's password and successfully entered the back end of the resident ticket system. All the records were managed using SQL. People who were familiar with this software could easily search through the huge amount of data. Gu Nyenji only needed to search the Japanese name Ishihara Shintaro for Ishihara Taro, and an accurate search result appeared. Ishihara Shintaro was under the name Ishihara Wakashi. In other words, Ishihara Wakashi was the household head, and Ishihara Taro was his grandson. Gu Nyenji looked at it for a long time and used the real-time translation software to understand the strings of katakana and hiragana. Who was Ishihara Wakashi? Gu Nyenji searched aimlessly in the Japanese resident ticket system. Suddenly, several people with the surname Ishihara popped up. One of them was called Ishihara Shiro. He was originally from Chiyo village in Wonwu Prefecture, Chiba Prefecture, Japan. Ishihara Shiro had an illustrious identity marked on the residential ticket. He used to be a lieutenant general in the Japanese army and the head of the Epidemic Prevention and Water Supply Department of the Guangdong Army, which was also a notorious numerical unit. Gu Nyenji's eyes widened. This Ishihara Shiro was actually Ishihara Wakashi's father, who was also Ishihara Taro's great-grandfather. Gu Nyenji hastily searched for information on Ishihara Shiro and discovered that it was actually this person who had conducted research on bacterial biological weapons in the Wuxia Empire. Then he had used the data of the biological weapons, which contained the blood and lives of the Wuxia Empire's citizens, to privately trade with the United States. That was how he had escaped the International Court of Justice's judgment as a war criminal. Her fingers almost trembled. Gu Nyenji immediately remembered that Gu Yenran's maternal great-grandfather, Kasahara, was also one of the core members of the military. Could there be a connection between the two? Her hands were trembling as she clumsily swiped on her phone. She switched to the internet and started searching for Ishihara Shiro and Ishihara Wakashi. This time, the Ishihara Corporation once again appeared on her search page. She simply opened the real-time translation software and did a full translation of the Ishihara Corporation's official website. She was shocked to discover that Ishihara Shiro was the founder of the Ishihara Corporation. However, Ishihara Shiro had died of cancer not long after the founding, and his son, Ishihara Wakashi, had taken over. Ishihara Wakashi had another son, and he was Ishihara Taro's father. He was also a famous physicist, but for some unknown reason he committed suicide at a young age. Therefore, Ishihara Taro was the Ishihara of the Ishihara Corporation. Although Gu Nyenji didn't have much experience in society, she knew that the Ishihara Corporation in Japan was a large enterprise. A war criminal who had committed uncountable war crimes in the Wuxia Empire had founded a corporation and returned to the Wuxia Empire after the war. Yes, there was nothing wrong with that. If she believed that he had repented and turned over a new leaf to contribute to the development of the Wuxia Empire, she might as well believe that pigs could fly. Then what kind of connection did the Ishihara Corporation have with Kasahara, Guyenran? After all, both of them had once served in the same military unit and could be considered comrades. Gu Nianji frantically searched the internet, but she couldn't find any more information. She even hacked into the internal system of the Ishihara Corporation's official website in Japan, but she couldn't find any clues related to Kasahara, Gu Yenran. Could it be that the two really weren't connected? Gu Nianji pondered as her fingers kept rubbing He Xiaoheng's number. Should she tell He Xiaoheng and let him investigate? He must have more methods and methods that would definitely be more complete than what she could obtain through hacking alone. But if she told He Xiaoheng, would he realize what she was doing? Gu Nianji hesitated for a long time. She was still thinking about this problem even after she returned to the dormitory from the library, showered, and lay in bed. Her fingers kept rubbing the phone. She didn't know how many times she had called He Xiaoheng's number, but she still couldn't make up her mind. Just when she couldn't make up her mind, her phone rang. It was actually He Xiaoheng's exclusive ringtone. Gu Nianji stared at the phone and suddenly smiled. Fine, she didn't need to make a decision. The phone had already made the decision for her. Gu Nianji swiped the phone open and picked it up. Her voice was relaxed and cheerful. He Xiaoheng had just finished work and put on his Bluetooth headset to go for a night jog. The winter weather in the imperial capital was very cold, but He Xiaoheng only wore a short-sleeved army t-shirt and camouflage pants as he jogged on the small road. Still awake. He Xiaoheng's voice was very relaxed. Haven't you finished your thesis? I've already finished it. I'm making the final edits now. Gu Nianji held the phone and chatted with him. Her earlier nervous mood instantly relaxed. But there are still a few compulsory exams that require written exams. I haven't started reading yet. He Xiaoheng wasn't worried about Gu Nianji's exams at all. He was only worried about her health. Does your body still hurt? Did you do any rehabilitation exercises? Gu Nianji, she was no longer in pain. She didn't feel any pain at all. She could do any movement without any problems. Xiao, I'm really fine. Why won't you believe me? Gu Nianji flipped over and made a rustling sound under the blanket. Xiaoheng could tell. You're already in bed? Yeah, I was just about to sleep when your call came in. Then I'll hang up. He Xiaoheng didn't want to disturb her sleep. He knew that she often stayed up late, so it wasn't good for her health. Gu Nianji quickly said, Don't hang up. I have something to tell you. He Xiaoheng remembered how Gu Nianji had tricked him the other day and warned her again. Don't run around. It's best if you stay in school until you graduate. Gu Nianji giggled and flipped over again. Xiao, can you help me check if the Ishihara Corporation in Japan has anything to do with the Kasahara family? Does it have anything to do with Gu Yenran? He Xiaoheng paused. Ishihara Corporation? Yes, can you check it? Why are you investigating them? This is the second update, and the monthly tickets have been delivered with 300 more updates. The guaranteed monthly tickets have been dropped, so everyone can vote now. There are also recommendation tickets. At 7 p.m. the third update. Wax. Chapter 936. Gu Nianji quickly weighed the pros and cons based on her understanding of He Xiaoheng. The moment she hesitated, alarm bells would go off in his mind. I discovered that the founder of this company is Ishihara Shiro. He was a comrade in the same army as Gu Yenran's maternal great-grandfather, Gu Nianji said subtly. And the Ishihara Corporation has been in our country for more than 10 years. He Xiaoheng stopped in his tracks. This time he wasn't fooled by her. His voice was calm but had an irresistible pressure. Why did you want to investigate the Ishihara Corporation? This was a long story. Gu Nianji looked up at the ceiling of the dormitory room. After a while she said, There's a new Japanese transfer student in our faculty. His name is Ishihara Taro. You want to investigate the Ishihara Corporation just because he's called Ishihara Taro? He Xiaoheng asked calmly. His casual tone was full of pressure. Nianji, when did you learn to hide half of what you're saying from me? Gu Nianji was speechless. She pursed her lips and stammered. He harassed Chi-Chi. This reason seemed quite reasonable. He Xiaoheng couldn't think of a rebuttal. He took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it on his palm. Huo Xiaoheng folded his hands and lit the cigarette with the lighter Gu Nianji had given him. He took a deep puff and exhaled a puff of white smoke. The smoke quickly dissipated in the cold winter air. That's all? Huo Xiaoheng squinted and looked at the empty training ground. He found a metal chair and sat down. He leaned forward and rested his arms on his knees. He held the cigarette between his fingers. His eyebrows didn't seem to change, but there was a faint indent between his brows. This girl was becoming more and more troublesome. Huo Xiaoheng silently took another puff. Seeing that Gu Nianji didn't reply for a long time, he didn't continue asking. He said, "I'll get Big Xiong to investigate tomorrow. Go to bed early." With that he hung up the phone. It was clean and clean without a single worry. Gu Nianji pouted and threw her phone away unhappily. She wrapped the blanket around her head and curled up in the darkness. Although she felt uncomfortable, she had a tiring day and had just passed on her worries to Huo Xiaoheng. Gu Nianji pounded the bed for a while before falling asleep. Huo Xiaoheng did not sleep the entire night. He returned to his office, turned on his computer, and personally investigated the Ishihara Corporation. Gu Nianji entered the external network, but Huo Xiaoheng could enter the internal network. But after browsing through the intranet, although there was quite a lot of news about the Ishihara Corporation, none of it had anything to do with Kasahara. Under such circumstances there were usually two reasons. The first was that it really didn't matter. One was that they had a very close relationship, but they didn't want others to know, so they deliberately hid it. If it was the former, there was nothing to investigate. However, if it was the latter, the meaning behind it was even deeper. Huo Xiaoheng thought about it and still ordered Yin Shixiang to assign tasks to the field agents in Japan. He asked them to investigate the Ishihara Corporation when they had time. In any case, they were overseas and the Special Operations Forces had great authority. As long as it was to achieve their goals, they could do anything without harming civilians. Furthermore, the authorization in Japan was much greater than in other countries. Of course, there were historical reasons for this, and it was also closely related to the Japanese authorities' unrepentant attitude towards the past wars. Since they didn't think they had done anything wrong in the past, then they could do it again at any time. Therefore, as one of the biggest victims of that war, it was completely legal and proper for the Huaxia Empire to maintain the necessary vigilance against the initiator of the war. Huo Xiaoheng had always been very open about his men's actions in Japan. He never cared what methods they used. It was also because of this reason that the Special Operations Forces obtained more information in Japan than in other countries. In less than 2 days, a lot of important news about the Ishihara Corporation was transmitted back through the specially encrypted Nanda communication satellite. Huo Xiaoheng looked at the important news sent by Yin Shixiang in his office and immediately understood that Gu Nianji definitely didn't want to investigate the Ishihara Corporation because Ishihara Taro harassed Machichi. "Huo Xiao, how did you know that the heir of the Ishihara Corporation, Ishihara Baisan, used to be Gu Xiangwen's classmate?" Yin Shixiang was very happy. This is another clue. Because the Gu Xiangwen they brought back from Barbados was a fake, the mission given to them by the military was still valid. They still had to continue investigating Gu Xiangwen's whereabouts. It turned out that among the information sent back by the Special Operations Forces field personnel, there was a lot of information that couldn't be found online. It was very obvious that the management of the Ishihara Corporation had the same security measures as the National Intelligence Agency, which was a deep distrust of the internet. They didn't put the truly important and confidential information online, but kept it in hard copies. Ishihara Shiro is the founder of the Ishihara Corporation, and Ishihara Wakashi is Ishihara Shiro's son. He is now in our country. Ishihara Baisan is Ishihara Wakashi's son, and he was a genius in Japan back then. Together with Gu Xiangwen, the Chinese genius, they were accepted as disciples by the most famous physicist in the United States. Ishihara Taro is Ishihara Baisan's son, and he was also known as a genius since he was young. Yin Shixiang had read these pieces of information countless times and could already recite them backwards. So why would Ishihara Baisan, a Japanese genius and the only heir of a large corporation, commit seppuku? Yin Shixiang was extremely curious about this. Huo Xiaoheng felt that he was being a little noisy, so he glanced at him and said calmly, "Ishihara Taro is currently studying in the B University Faculty of Law, and I heard that he has a good impression of Chichi." Yin Shixiang's smug expression instantly turned hideous, and he slashed his hand down like a knife. *CK. "You little brat, how dare you steal my woman? Do you want to die? You have to pay attention to your image and discipline." Huo Xiaoheng flipped through the information in front of him without batting an eyelid. Ishihara Taro is an international friend. Pfft. In Shixiang's face turned red. I can't stand it if I'm a man. Wuxiao, how do you know that Ishihara Taro has a good impression of Qiqi? Nianji is obviously smarter and prettier than Qiqi, so why doesn't he have a good impression of Nianji? Why does he have to look for my Qiqi? Is he blind? Huo Xiaoheng glanced at him and his voice deepened. So you're saying that you're blind? If Qiqi finds out about this, I'll consider it my loss if she doesn't break up with you. In Shixiang was speechless. He immediately realized that he had said the wrong thing and almost wanted to kneel in front of Huo Xiaoheng. Wuxiao, Chief, you can't treat your loyal subordinate like this. Huo Xiaoheng flipped through another page of information non-committally. The only sound in the quiet office was the rustling of papers. In Shixiang held it in for a long time before saying, Huo Xiao, the person I love is Qiqi. In my eyes, of course she's better than anyone else, even Nianji. But objectively speaking, when Qiqi and Nianji are together, the first person people see is Nianji, not Qiqi. So if someone still likes Qiqi under these circumstances, it's either true love for her, or they're really trying to harm her. No matter what the situation is, they'll be ruthlessly beaten to death. Good domineering. You're indeed my soldier. Huo Xiaoheng looked up at him and said calmly, all right, get up. From the looks of it, isn't it time for you to submit your marriage report? This is the third update. The guaranteed monthly votes have been dropped, so my dear ones can vote now. There are also recommendation votes. Moi. Chapter 937. In Shixiang was indeed dating Ma Qiqi for the sake of marrying her. He froze when he heard Huo Xiaoheng mention marriage. Huo Xiao, it's almost the new year. In Shixiang slowly stood up and said embarrassedly, I haven't met my parents yet. I've met my parents. To be precise, he hadn't met In Shixiang's parents yet. He had only met Ma Qiqi's parents. In Shixiang's father was the mayor of a city in the south, and his mother was a university professor. His family background was slightly higher than Ma Qiqi's, but they were still a good match. He planned to bring Ma Qiqi home to meet his parents during the new year. His parents definitely wouldn't object. Even if Ma Qiqi was an unemployed high school graduate, his parents wouldn't object. Not to mention that Ma Qiqi was a good student from a prestigious university with a master's degree in law at B University. The couple had been looking forward to their son's marriage until their hair had turned white, and their requirements had been lowered again and again. Now, as long as the bride was a woman, had no criminal record and was about the same age as him, it would be fine. Even a single woman with a child could be considered. Huo Xiaoheng knew all this. Because he was In Shixiang's superior, In Shixiang's parents always called Huo Xiaoheng when they couldn't find In Shixiang in person, hoping that he could help manage his subordinates' personal problems. They even indirectly asked In Shixiang if there was a problem with his sexual orientation. Huo Xiaoheng used to be single and would usually forget such requests after hearing them. He would never force his subordinates to go on blind dates to find a wife, of course. It was different now. He looked at In Shixiang with a half-smile. Are you worried that your parents won't agree? With a good girl like Qiqi, your parents will probably force you to get married as soon as they see you. In Shixiang chuckled. That's why I'm bringing her home to reassure them. As for the marriage report, I have to discuss it with Qiqi first and get her approval. Also, I haven't proposed yet. Huo Xiaoheng looked a little uncomfortable. His eyes narrowed as he looked at In Shixiang thoughtfully for a while. He slowly looked down at the documents in front of him and asked dryly, Propose? Yes, that's the most important thing for a girl. How would she marry you if she didn't propose? Don't even think about it. In Shixiang chuckled as he explained his plan. He rubbed his hands together and said, So, I'm going to bring Qiqi back to my house and prepare a grand proposal at my house. I've already secretly told Qiqi's parents to come over to my house for the new year. We must give Qiqi a grand proposal so that she can't wait to marry me. Huo Xiaoheng pursed his lips and flipped a page as if nothing had happened. His voice suddenly turned cold. All right, you can leave now. Don't think too much during work. You are a soldier of the people. Don't forget your responsibilities. In Shixiang was confused by Huo Xiaoheng's sudden change in attitude. Huo Xiao, what did I do? Didn't you want me to submit a marriage report? He looked at Huo Xiaoheng suspiciously and his heart suddenly tightened. Could it be that he couldn't take it anymore because he was showing off too much affection? After all, Nianji had been trying to break up with Huo Xiao. That couldn't be. Didn't he see them reconcile that day? Otherwise, why would he be so stupid as to sprinkle salt on other people's wounds? In Shixiang asked tentatively, Huo Xiao, you and Nianji, Is the good news coming soon? Wu Xiaoheng looked up. His expression had already returned to normal. He calmly looked at Yin Shixiang's face, which had turned from red to white. Big Xiong, is this considered spying on your superior? Do you want to be grounded or have your newly risen star demoted? Hu Xiao, I was just saying casually. I had absolutely no intention of spying on your privacy. Yin Shixiang quickly waved his hands in denial. Don't worry, I will definitely put all my effort into my work. That Ishihara Taro, do you want someone to keep an eye on him? Hu Xiaoheng shook his head and said nonchalantly, why should we keep an eye on him? Did he commit any crimes? Why not? He's in the right to covet someone else's girlfriend. Yin Shixiang was agitated. Who knows what else he will do? What if he has ulterior motives? For example, getting close to Qiqi was actually to get close to Nianji? Yin Shixiang looked at Hu Xiaoheng's expression without blinking. He thought to himself, I'll see how long you can pretend for. Not allowing me to keep an eye on that little bastard is completely using his position to get back at him. Wu Xiaoheng seemed to see through his thoughts. He said seriously, Big Xiong, we control the nation's important weapons. They are not used for personal gain. You can't use the nation's methods to deal with someone just because he covets your girlfriend. Will your conscience be able to live with this? I won't be able to live with my conscience if I don't do it, Yin Shixiang cursed silently, but he did not dare to disobey Hu Xiaoheng's orders. Moreover, he also knew that Hu Xiaoheng was right. If there was no concrete evidence to prove that Ishihara Taro was a threat to the nation's interests, the Special Operations Forces could not take action. If Ishihara Taro only coveted Ma Qiqi, it would not affect the nation's interests. It would only affect Yin Shixiang's interests. Yin Shixiang sighed and lowered his head to Hu Xiaoheng to admit his mistake. Wu Xiao, I was wrong. Please punish me. His thoughts just now were indeed a little overboard. As the deputy chief of the Special Operations Forces, he actually had the intention of using public resources for personal gain. It was indeed worthy of punishment. Hu Xiaoheng looked at him for a while and said slowly, It's good that you can think of it yourself. Go back and write me a 5,000-word self-reflection report. Then, you will be suspended for a month to reflect on your actions. Yes, Chief. Yin Shixiang was not unhappy when he heard that. Instead, he was happy. Wu Xiaoheng was actually helping him. Yes, they could not use the Special Operations Forces methods to deal with Ishihara Taro just because he coveted Ma Qiqi. However, as a person, Yin Shixiang could keep an eye on Ishihara Taro and prevent him from getting too close to his girlfriend. Wu Xiaoheng suspended him for a month, which happened to be the 15th day of the first month after the Spring Festival. It was completely giving him a long holiday. Yin Shixiang left Wu Xiaoheng's office happily and went back to write his 5,000-word self-reflection report. Meanwhile, Wu Xiaoheng personally contacted the Japanese field personnel and asked them to continue investigating if the Ishihara Corporation had any contact with the Kasahara family. Ishihara Bai-san was actually Gu Xiangwen's classmate. This was the first time they had found out about this. Moreover, they did not find out from Gu Xiangwen but from the Ishihara family. This was because when Ishihara Bai-san went to the United States to attend university, he used an alias. It was a standard American name and not his real name. The field personnel in Japan also discovered that Ishihara Bai-san and Gu Xiangwen were classmates because of a coincidence. This was because the Ishihara family really valued Gu Xiangwen too much. Ishihara Wakashi often used Gu Xiangwen's academic record as a role model to encourage his grandson to study hard and catch up to Gu Xiangwen. Therefore, there were quite a few servants in the Ishihara family who knew about this past. Otherwise, outsiders wouldn't be able to find out. Wu Xiaoheng looked at the personal growth chart in front of him and added a piece of information. This was Gu Xiangwen's life trajectory. He really worked hard to perfect it and put together a complete chart. Then, he would be able to know many causes and effects. After a day, Wu Xiaoheng called Gu Nianji and told her about the information he had found. When Gu Nianji heard that Ishihara Taro's father, Ishihara Bai-san, was her father's classmate in university, she immediately understood why Ishihara Taro's academic record was such an eyesore to her. That feeling was very strange. Now she finally found the answer. Looks like the Ishihara family has always treated my father as an opponent. Gu Nianji laughed softly. Her tone was filled with indescribable contempt and disdain. Wu Xiaoheng smiled and said gently, Only people who are inferior to others will treat others as opponents. Ishihara Bai-san is definitely inferior to Mr. Gu. Gu Nianji nodded heavily. She sat in front of the computer and made the final edits to her thesis. She said nonchalantly, That's for sure. Maybe he committed suicide because he couldn't compare to my father in every aspect. These Japanese are all like this. They even call it the samurai spirit. Haha, to put it bluntly, it's the behavior of a coward who couldn't handle failure and committed suicide. Hua Xiaoheng's heart skipped a beat. He sat up straight. What did you say just now? Say it again. Gu Nianji's hands stopped typing. What did I say? The sentence before. Because he couldn't compare to my father in every aspect, he committed suicide? Gu Nianji was stunned. She raised her well-proportioned eyebrows. I was just saying. There's no basis for it. You took it seriously? Of course, Hua Xiaoheng wouldn't take it seriously just because of that. He had some evidence. The only information Gu Xiangwen could find on the internet was his academic resume. After that, he didn't even publish academic articles, so there was no more news about him. And in his academic resume, his first major achievement was a major breakthrough in the research of the blue planet's magnetic field. And it was in the year that Gu Xiangwen made this major achievement that Ishihara Bai-san committed suicide. That year, Gu Xiangwen was only in his 20s. Ishihara Bai-san was already in his early 30s. Although they were classmates, Gu Xiangwen's level of genius was obviously more outstanding than Ishihara Bai-san's. Hua Xiaoheng told Gu Nianji about this discovery. Gu Nianji clicked her tongue. Ishihara Bai-san really couldn't afford to lose? Was he also doing research in this area? Hua Xiaoheng looked at the information sent back by the Japanese field agents and nodded. Not only was he doing research in this area, but he was also doing it with the support of the Japanese military. Gu Xiangwen, on the other hand, was completely relying on his own abilities to do research in this area. He didn't have as many resources as Ishihara Bai-san, but his achievements surpassed Ishihara Bai-san's. What did this mean? It meant that Gu Xiangwen's talent also surpassed Ishihara Bai-san's. Ishihara Bai-san might really have become angry out of humiliation and couldn't take it anymore, so he committed suicide. As soon as Ishihara Bai-san died, the Japanese military's Blue Planet Magnetic Field project was completely nullified. This was because breakthroughs in high-energy physics were different from biology. Biology could use human wave tactics, and countless people would put in endless time and effort to achieve a little bit of progress. But high-energy physics was a discipline that completely relied on geniuses to push forward progress. Every major discovery in high-energy physics was a major contribution of genius scholars. And it was already good enough for a country to have one such genius for a period of time. Therefore, after Ishihara Bai-san committed suicide, the magnetic field experiment couldn't continue, and the Japanese military had no choice but to cancel the entire project. At this point, Hua Xiaoheng suddenly fell silent. He remembered that the Huaxia Empire's military had once cooperated with the Institute of High-Energy Physics on a project that also seemed to be related to magnetic fields. This is the first update. It's a new month and the guaranteed monthly tickets have already been dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. There are also recommendation tickets. Monthly tickets will increase by 600 updates at 1 p.m. Third update at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you to Yunhan Yuqin and Steamed Bun Face Meow for each tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Mwah. Chapter 938. Magnetic Fields Again. Hua Xiaoheng quietly turned on his computer and found Gu Xiangwen's original paper. He paid for it and carefully read it. However, different professions were worlds apart. He knew all the theories in the computer field like the back of his hand, but this paper was full of high-energy physics theories. It was like a heavenly book to him. He knew every word, but he didn't understand what they meant when put together. Hua Xiaoheng had no choice but to forward the paper to his mother, Song Jining. She was an expert in this field, and what she was doing was restarting the experiment from back then. Then he called Song Jining. Song Jining had just come out of the laboratory and returned to her office. She saw the caller ID on her phone. It was Hua Xiaoheng calling. She was very surprised and swiped it open to answer. Xiaoheng? Did the sun rise from the west today? Song Jining teased him with a smile and returned to her desk to sit down. Hua Xiaoheng's calm voice sounded from the phone. Miss Song, I just sent you a paper on magnetic field research. Can you take a look at it and write me a simple and easy-to-understand abstract? Magnetic field research? Son, why are you interested in high-energy physics? Song Jining turned on her computer and opened her email to find the email Hua Xiaoheng had sent her. Opening the attached paper, Song Jining skimmed through it and said, "This is a very old paper. It can be considered as the foundation and starting point for countries to study the blue star magnetic field. What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Hua Xiaoheng enunciated each word. Kevin Ku, who wrote this paper, is Nianji's father, Gu Xiangwen. Song Jining stood up in surprise. He's really Nianji's father? Ah, that's great. When are you going to ask him out? We two future in-laws can have a good chat and discuss academic issues. I thought only Nianji was worthy of you, but now that you know her father, I think you're the one who's above your league. This Kevin Ku is a rare genius in our physics world. I don't know if he's willing to marry his daughter to you. After all, you're not in physics. Song Jining looked a bit regretful. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. Miss Song, speak properly. Don't be too distracted. Hua Xiaoheng tapped on the keyboard in front of him as if nothing had happened. He wasn't going to tell Song Jining that he had already married Gu Xiangwen's daughter. Therefore, Miss Song's future in-laws was not very accurate. It should be in-laws. For confidentiality reasons, Hua Xiaoheng had never told Song Jining about Gu Xiangwen. Therefore, Song Jining knew Kevin Ku, but she didn't know that Gu Xiangwen was Kevin Ku. Similarly, Hua Xiaoheng didn't know that the internationally renowned Kevin Ku was Gu Nianji's father, Gu Xiangwen. The first time he found out that Gu Xiangwen was Kevin Ku was from Xie Dezhao. Hua Xiaoheng admired Gu Xiangwen even more. This person was extremely intelligent. He was actually able to leave traces of himself in the world, but he also scattered these traces. If it wasn't by chance, no one would be able to get news of him. These things seemed to be coincidences, but who knew if there was a connection? Just like the person who used a gold coin to change the random status. Perhaps Gu Xiangwen was also an expert. Gu Xiangwen's thesis was groundbreaking and foundational. It didn't seem very technical at the moment, but all the countries were already doing research based on his thesis and had already made great progress. Song Jining explained it to Hua Xiaoheng in a few words, and he quickly understood. Ishihara Baisan and Gu Xiangwen must have done the groundbreaking research at the same time. However, Gu Xiangwen was the first to make a breakthrough and published a thesis in the most famous international physics journal, becoming the father of magnetic fields. Ishihara Baisan, who had always been secretly competing with him, couldn't accept such an achievement. However, they were both in academia, yet he couldn't even accept this. Could it be that Ishihara Baisan had always been first, so he couldn't bear to be surpassed by Gu Xiangwen? Hua Xiaoheng shook his head and stopped thinking about why Ishihara Baisan committed suicide. His death was beneficial to the Huaxia Empire anyway. Who cared why he died? A dead Japanese right wing was a good right wing. Gu Nianji immersed herself in her intense final revision. She finally finished her thesis, printed it out and sent it to He Jichu. He was her tutor and was in charge of the final round of review. After dinner, she and Machichi carried their backpacks and went to the library to revise. They planned to hug Ishihara's leg one last time. They met Ishihara Taro in the library, but he didn't speak to them. It was as if he didn't know them. Instead, he was chatting and laughing with their tutor, Gue Suyao. The two of them brushed past Gu Nianji and Machichi. Gue Suyao was completely focused on Ishihara Taro and didn't notice that the students passing by were Gu Nianji and Machichi. Ishihara Taro recognized them, but he didn't speak to them. He only raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. His eyes glanced at them. Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat. She pulled Machichi and asked softly, "Chichi, did Tutor Gue know this Ishihara Taro a long time ago, or did she only know him recently? Do you know?" Machichi had a good relationship with her classmates, so she knew the gossip more quickly. Hearing Gu Nianji's question, she whispered into her ear and said very softly, "I heard that they met before Christmas. It was outside of school, not in school. After that, Ishihara Taro transferred to our school as an exchange student." Tutor Gue was very surprised. Rumor has it that this Japanese exchange student came to our school because of Tutor Gue. Even mature women like Gue Suyao, who was 26 or 27 years old, liked this kind of romance, much less a young girl of 18 or 19 years old. Gu Nianji looked thoughtfully in the direction that Gue Suyao and Ishihara Taro had disappeared. She had a feeling that what Ishihara Taro had done was not as simple as throwing gold coins. They knew each other before Christmas? That's a good story. How did they know each other? Did anyone pass along the details? Gu Nianji asked Machichi with great interest. People who liked to gossip were happy to be able to share the details of gossip with others. Machichi pulled her to the library corridor and whispered to her, "Of course they did. Do you think Tutor Gue would have kept quiet when she had such an opportunity?" "What did they say?" "I heard that Tutor Gue accidentally sprained her ankle when she went shopping at Sion Plaza. Coincidentally, she met this handsome Japanese man. He helped her and sent her home. The next day he specially brought a doctor to visit her. After a while the two of them got to know each other. Machichi said excitedly. Gunyinji narrowed her eyes. Really? They got to know each other before Christmas? Then why didn't he come to our Christmas party? Why didn't Tutor Gue bring him out to show off? I heard that she invited him. But Ishihara Taro said that his grandfather was coming to China, and he had to accompany him. He also said that there was still a long way to go and that she shouldn't be angry. Then, you found out that he transferred to our school and got back together with Counselor Gue. Gunyinji's eyes flashed. But Ishihara Taro seemed to be more interested in Archichi. Machichi pushed her away embarrassedly. Stop talking. She only said a few words to Ishihara Taro before, and everyone started to make a fuss. Even Tutor Gue was unhappy. Oh? That's why the details of Tutor Gue and Ishihara Taro getting to know each other were leaked, right? Gunyinji's analysis was very meticulous. Someone must be jealous and spreading rumors. Very quickly he understood the ins and outs of this tale. Machichi thought about it and couldn't help but laugh. If you didn't mention it, I really wouldn't have noticed the timing. It seemed like Tutor Gue was jealous. That was why she spread the news of her knowing Ishihara Taro a long time ago. Machichi pouted. I have a boyfriend. Who would fight with her for this Japanese guy? Also, I'm a few years older than the Japanese guy. I don't like guys younger than me. Gunyinji gave her a thumbs up. Chichi has good taste. But in her heart, she was thinking that after she and Hijichu left Jinling Bar on Christmas Eve, they met with danger on the road. Could it have something to do with Ishihara Taro? After all, he had already tried to kill Gunyinji at least twice. And before these two times, Gunyinji had just experienced an even more inexplicable and dangerous situation. They only managed to escape because Hijichu's car was a little special. Originally, she didn't connect Ishihara Taro with the car brake malfunction on Christmas Eve. That was because before today the two didn't seem to be related at all. But from what Machichi said just now, Gue Suyao actually became familiar with Ishihara Taro just before Christmas. That was more suspicious. And there was a possible connection between her accident and Ishihara Taro, which meant that it was Gue Suyao. It was the second update and the monthly tickets were 600 plus updates. It was the new month and the guaranteed monthly tickets had dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. There were also recommendation tickets. The third update at 7 p.m. Moi. Chapter 939. Gunyinji's suspicions were certainly well-founded. She and Hijichu had analyzed the situation later. Since their accident wasn't a coincidence, then it was very likely that someone had tipped them off or even colluded with them. She herself had a grudge with Gue Suyao, and it wasn't a small one. If Ishihara Taro needed Gue Suyao's help for some reason, it didn't have to be serious. She only needed to make a phone call and report Gunyinji's whereabouts. Could it be that her breakthrough point was Gue Suyao? Gunyinji returned to the library and forced herself to go back to her books. She revised the content of her exams again. Even if she wanted to make a move on Gue Suyao, she had to wait until she graduated. She only had 2 weeks left. The remaining 2 weeks were 1 week for revision and the other for exams. After that, the school would be on winter break. Her graduation thesis defense would be on the last day of the exam week. Gunyinji didn't want to make a move on Gue Suyao for now, but someone with ulterior motives couldn't hold back anymore. Gue Suyao and Ishihara Taro kissed as they walked into her bedroom. This was the apartment she rented off campus. It was a small one-bedroom and very clean. There were white linen curtains with light purple patterns and plain wood furniture. There was a wooden vase on the small coffee table in the middle of the living room. Ishihara Taro had given her a few winter jasmine flowers. The winter jasmine hadn't bloomed yet at this time of year. Those who could get their hands on such flowers had to be nurtured in a special greenhouse. It didn't look like much, but in this midwinter weather, it wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Money wasn't the most important thing. Ishihara Taro had just turned 18. He was 8 or 9 years younger than Gue Suyao. Also, his face was small, so he looked like a teenager. She didn't have any extravagant hopes that this handsome heir of the Nippon Corporation would take a liking to her. But the pie in the sky had finally fallen on her head. This handsome young man had finally become a guest of hers. The two of them rolled onto the bed and quickly made love like they were familiar with each other. After it was over, Ishihara Taro leaned against the headboard and smoked. His expression was very indifferent. Gue Suyao wrapped herself in a blanket and propped her head up against the pillow. She looked at him in fascination and asked, Ishihara, can you really convince your grandfather? Ishihara Taro blew a puff of white smoke at her, squinted his eyes and smiled. Of course, I'm my grandfather's only grandson. He'll listen to whatever I say. Gue Suyao was relieved and leaned on Ishihara Taro's shoulder. The 18-year-old Ishihara Taro had a frail figure. His skin was pale and his collarbones were distinct. Even so, Gue Suyao still felt good because of the explosive power. This man was good-looking, had a powerful family and loved her. It would be strange if she let him go. At that moment, Gue Suyao had even forgotten about Hijichu. She only had eyes for Ishihara Taro. She was Hijichu's in-service doctoral student, so she had to take her final exams as well. However, she had been hanging out with Ishihara Taro for the past few days and had no time to study at all. Maybe she would fail, but she didn't care anymore. As long as she could marry Ishihara Taro, it didn't matter whether she got her PhD or not. Ishihara Taro finished his cigarette and turned around to see Gue Suyao's infatuated expression. He smiled and leaned down again. After another round of lovemaking, Gue Suyao hugged Ishihara Taro and didn't allow him to roll over. She whispered in his ear, "Gunyenji is already back. She's fine." Ishihara Taro's body stiffened. He slowly pushed her away and sat up. He said coldly, "What does it have to do with me whether she's fine or not?" Gue Suyao was stunned and quickly sat up. She asked anxiously, "Don't you want her to die?" "Shut up." Ishihara Taro suddenly raised his voice and shouted at her. "When did I want her to die? Don't talk nonsense." Gue Suyao understood and quickly expressed her loyalty. "Ishihara, don't worry. I won't betray you. Besides, if you can really let her die, I'll be happier than you." Ishihara Taro glanced at her and didn't say anything. He slowly leaned against the bed and wanted to smoke again. He searched the bedside table for a long time and found a pack of cigarettes. He looked at it and took one out to put it in his mouth. After a while he said calmly, "I don't want her to die, but if God wants her to die, no one can stop him. Don't you think so?" Gue Suyao smiled happily. "Of course. It has nothing to do with us. That was the best. Otherwise she would have to think about how to create an alibi." The two of them talked for a while more. Only after Gue Suyao agreed to help Ishihara Taro keep an eye on Gunyenji's whereabouts did Ishihara Taro leave her house. During the weekend, Gunyenji decided to go back to the house she bought in Hipingli. Machichi was very surprised. "There's only 1 week left before the final exams. Isn't it a waste of time for you to run around?" Gunyenji smiled at her mischievously and said something that was very annoying. "I've already done my revision. There's only 1 week left. I want to relax before the exams." "Gunyenji, go away." Machichi was very angry when she heard that. "I'm also a straight-A student. But I'll be crushed by a straight-A student like you. I don't want to see you again." "It's okay, my dear Chichi. I'm just a day student. Every morning I'll bring you breakfast and have dinner with you at night. I'll only go back after that. Don't worry, I won't leave you alone." As Gunyenji said that, she even winked at Machichi. Machichi was captivated by Gunyenji's sudden flirtatious behavior. She smiled and flicked Gunyenji's forehead. "Okay, I'll let you off this time. If you're so arrogant again, I'll punish you to draw out the key points for the exams." "No problem, no problem." Gunyenji finally calmed Machichi down. She packed a simple suitcase and dragged it out of B University. As soon as she left the school gates, she felt that someone was following her. It wasn't the people from the Special Operations Forces. Those people were too skilled. If they didn't want her to discover them, she wouldn't have been able to sense that someone was following her. However, these people following her were obviously newbies. When Gunyenji thought about how Hua Xiaoheng's men were protecting her in secret, she felt more confident. She still had this bit of courage to go against Ishihara Taro. Gunyenji pretended not to see the sneaky people and dragged her suitcase towards the Hipingli precinct. The precinct was actually not far from B University. If she walked and took a shortcut, it would only take about 20 minutes. It wasn't much slower than driving. Gunyenji's car was still parked in the underground garage of the Hipingli precinct. She planned to drive her car to and from school in the future. 20 minutes later, she walked through the main gate of the Hipingli precinct. The people who were following her shook at the door and scattered in all directions. This precinct was more strictly managed. Anyone who wasn't a resident of the precinct had to show their identification and register before they could enter. Gunyenji used the key card to open her room. She looked at the warm sunlight pouring down on the floor and gradually calmed her nerves. She took a deep breath. The game had officially begun. Between Ishihara Taro and her, who would be the one to control the storm? It was the third watch. It was the new month and the guaranteed monthly votes had dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. There were also recommendation votes. Moi. Chapter 940. On Saturday morning, Gunyenji arrived at the apartment she had bought in the Hipingli district. She could tell that no one had been in the apartment. Although the doors and windows were tightly shut, there was still a thin layer of dust on the windowsill and furniture. Gunyenji was very satisfied. She treated the apartment as her own little world and did not intend to share it with unrelated people, even if it was a part-time cleaner. Putting down her suitcase and computer bag, Gunyenji went to the kitchen to find a rag and began to carefully wipe the apartment. First, she used a dry rag to wipe away the dust, then used a wet tissue to wipe again and disinfect it. By the time she had wiped all the rooms until they were sparkling clean, 3 hours had passed. She could not even straighten her back. Gunyenji threw herself onto the sofa and lay on the extremely flexible corner sofa. She covered her eyes with one arm and did not want to move for a long time. After her breathing stabilized, she felt her stomach growl. It was time for lunch. Gunyenji rubbed her stomach and sat up from the sofa. She suddenly remembered that she did not know how to cook. How would she solve the problem of eating alone for 2 days? There was no food in the fridge except for water. There seemed to be rice in the kitchen cupboard, but other than that there was nothing else. She weighed the options of buying groceries, ordering takeout, and eating out for a while before deciding to eat out. She did not know how to cook even if she bought groceries, so why waste them? As for ordering takeout, it was more troublesome. There were too many uncontrollable factors, so it was not suitable for her at the moment. Moreover, she needed to go out more to contribute more parameters to Ishihara Taro's algorithm. The corners of Gunyenji's lips curled up into a sly smile. She walked to the bedroom to get her small backpack and saw herself in the mirror smiling like a little fox. She quickly used her hand to rub the corners of her lips and revealed the most tranquil smile. Coming out of the apartment, Gunyenji entered the elevator and pressed the button for the first floor. At this time there was no one outside the apartment. She was the only one staring at the mirror in the elevator in a daze. The elevator was an important parameter. When Gunyenji came out of the elevator, she had already silently calculated the probability of the elevator accident. If she were Ishihara Taro, she would not let go of such a good tool like the elevator. After exiting from the main gate of the Hipingli district, he walked along a quiet path, walked all the way out, turned left, and walked for about 200 meters before arriving at a commercial street. There were supermarkets, restaurants, cafes, internet cafes, gyms, and bars. From small shops that only served porridge for breakfast to high-end restaurants that could treat people to a Manchu-Han imperial feast in the evening, there was everything that one could wish for. For someone with terrible cooking skills like Gunyenji, this place could be considered a treasure trove. Gunyenji randomly walked through a few shops and found a shop that looked pleasing to the eye. She bought a basket of small steamed buns and a bowl of millet porridge. When she saw the crispy fried dough sticks, she couldn't help but buy a thick fried dough stick and a bowl of salted tofu pudding. She put them in a lunchbox to take away. After walking for a while, she remembered that she had bought food for breakfast, and it was already noon. Gunyenji stopped in her tracks and found another luxurious restaurant. She ordered a few dishes and sat by the window, lost in thought as she stared at the scenery outside. Outside the window there was a sidewalk paved with colored stones, and the sidewalk was lined with sycamore trees. It was winter, and the leaves of the sycamore trees had already fallen off, leaving only bare branches. Further ahead was the main road. Although it was winter, the streets were still bustling with traffic and it was very lively. Small evergreen shrubs were planted under the window sill, and they were still lush in winter. During Christmas, they could also be used as small Christmas trees to hang colored lights. There weren't many people in the restaurant. Gunyenji only looked out the window for a while before 2 people opened the door and entered the restaurant. They looked like a couple. They sat down not far from Gunyenji. They leaned their heads against each other and whispered to each other, looking very intimate. If they didn't constantly look at Gunyenji from the corners of their eyes, Gunyenji would really believe that they were a couple. Not long after, the dishes she ordered were served. A dish of glistening yellow shredded banana served as a dessert, a dish of milky white and tender Shishire's tongue soup, a dish of light yellow soft minced meat pot tofu, and a small bowl of fragrant Thai rice were placed on the table, steaming hot. Gunyenji was so hungry that she buried her head in the food alone. The people in the restaurant all noticed the young girl sitting by the window. She looked to be 18 or 19 years old, but she ate with an incomparable satisfaction and sweetness. Everyone's appetite increased when they saw her, and they didn't know what kind of delicacy she was eating. Although there wasn't much food in front of her, the portion was enough for 2 men, but she finished it all by herself. After eating, she looked at the empty plate in front of her, longing to lick it again. The chef of the restaurant saw this and rubbed his hands in joy. She really liked his food. There was nothing that made a chef happier than this. In his excitement, he asked someone to give Gu Nianji a 20% discount card, saying that as long as she ate here, she would get a lifetime discount. Gu Nianji didn't expect to have such good luck for lunch, and she smiled at the waiter who gave her the discount card. She was born delicate and beautiful. When she was young, she was mostly cute. Now that she was an adult and had sex, she couldn't help but have a hint of gentleness in her eyes. When she smiled at people without any subtlety, it made people's hearts pound. They only felt that the smile was like the first handful of snow on the plum blossoms in winter, bright and beautiful. Under the pure whiteness, there was a gorgeous color that was half hidden, and it was even more moving. Thank you. Gu Nianji took the 20% discount card and wrote a 20% tip on the bill, returning almost all the discount. Gu Nianji lowered her head. The waiter couldn't see her face, but he still felt dazzled. Although he was in the restaurant, it was like he was in a garden. The breathtaking scenery just now was like a dream. He returned to the checkout counter with the bill and card in hand, and then slowly came back to his senses. Gu Nianji didn't know anything about this. She put away her things and waited for the waiter to take her card back. She still looked out the window at the sidewalk. During the meal, she counted about 98 people passing by the sidewalk outside the window. She didn't know how many of the 98 people were permanent residents here, and how many were just passing by. This would affect their calculations. The waiter came back and returned Gu Nianji's card to her. He mustered up his courage and said, "Tomorrow we have a chef we hired from out of town to do a food exhibition. Miss, if you're free you can come by again." Gu Nianji saw that the people here were polite and generous, and the food tasted to her liking, so she agreed immediately. "Okay, I'll come back tomorrow." "Thank you, handsome." She said it casually, and the waiter blushed. He personally walked her out and even helped her open the curtain and pushed the door open. After returning to the apartment, Gu Nianji put the breakfast she bought in the fridge. She planned to have some for supper and the rest for breakfast the next day. She was actually very lazy, and even if she went out every day, she only wanted to go out once. Saturday passed in a blink of an eye. The next day was Sunday, and Gu Nianji slept in. When she woke up, it was already noon. She ate the leftovers from yesterday's breakfast for lunch, then took a shower, changed her clothes, and tidied up the room. She then looked at her schedule for the next week. After making a few changes, she realized it was already 4 in the afternoon. She slowly packed her suitcase again and carried it downstairs. This time, she went to the apartment's underground parking lot. The flashy red custom-made Ferrari that Hua Xiaoheng had given her was parked there. Gu Nianji threw her suitcase in the back seat, then opened the door to sit in the driver's seat. She checked the condition of the car, and only after everything was in good condition did she drive out with peace of mind. Long after she drove out of the Hepingli precinct, the people loitering at the entrance finally realized that she had actually driven away. When she arrived at the restaurant she went to yesterday, Gu Nianji parked the car on the side of the road. It wasn't even 5 o'clock yet, and people didn't have dinner that early, so it wasn't difficult to find a parking space. Gu Nianji pushed the door open, and the waiter from yesterday immediately jogged over with a smile. "Miss, you're here." Gu Nianji nodded. "I'm here to try the signature dishes of the chef you specially hired. Please take a seat here. This is today's special menu. The kitchen has already started preparing. What would you like? This is the freshest dish." The waiter enthusiastically introduced the day's special dishes to her. Gu Nianji looked very attentively and picked a few dishes that she hadn't tried before, but that Ma Chichi would also like. The waiter happily took the menu and went to report the dishes to the kitchen. Because there weren't many people, and because the chef wanted to try his hand first, the 4 dishes that Gu Nianji ordered were prepared quickly and well. Gu Nianji only ate 1 dish and had the waiter pack the other 3 dishes for her to take away. The waiter saw that she only ate 1 of the 4 dishes she had ordered this time, and thought that she didn't like these dishes. He couldn't help asking in confusion, "Are these dishes not to your taste?" Gu Nianji shook her head and smiled. "No, these dishes are very delicious. I want to take these 3 dishes back to share with my friends. They're so delicious." So that was how it was. The waiter was happy again and carefully packed the dishes for Gu Nianji before personally seeing her out. However, when he saw Gu Nianji's bright red luxury car parked on the side of the road, his attitude couldn't help but become even more respectful. Gunyenji got into the car and waved at him before quickly driving away. As soon as she left, a few people also got into their cars and drove away. Gunyenji drove all the way back to B University and parked in the paid parking lot. This was one of the few times that she drove, so she was still a bit rusty and didn't drive very fast. It took her half an hour to drive a distance that could have taken her 20 minutes on foot. However, when she returned to the dormitory, Machichi's enthusiastic cheers made Gunyenji feel that the trip was worth it. "Nyenji, where did you find such delicious food? It's so good I can have it all myself." Machichi excitedly picked up a small bowl and scooped herself a bowl of rice. Although she had already eaten dinner, it wasn't impossible for her to have another meal with such delicious food in front of her. Gunyenji waved at her. "Eat slowly, I'm going to the library." After resting for 2 days, she resumed her routine at school. Every day was the library, cafeteria, and dormitory. A week had passed. Ishihara Taro crossed his arms in front of his chest and sat in his high-rise apartment in San Juan. He closed his eyes and listened to his subordinates report on Gunyenji's whereabouts. "Young master, Gunyenji's schedule this week has changed. She didn't stay at school all the time but went to her apartment in Hipingli during the weekend and stayed there alone. She went out for a meal during the day and spent the rest of the time in the neighborhood. The security in the neighborhood is very tight, so we didn't sneak in for the time being to avoid alerting the enemy. Young master, Gunyenji has a fixed restaurant. She went there for 2 days in a row, and the people there even gave her a 20% discount card." Young master, Gunyenji returned to school from her apartment. This time no one picked her up. She walked to her apartment and drove a Ferrari sports car back. Ishihara Taro suddenly opened his eyes. "A Ferrari sports car?" "Yes, it's a very luxurious custom-made Ferrari sports car. According to the information that Miss Gu Yenran sent, this Ferrari sports car was a Valentine's Day gift from her ex-lover, Hua Xiaoheng, when they were still together. However, they broke up after the incident in Germany. This is the first update with 3,600 words. It's a new month and the guaranteed monthly votes have been dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. There are also recommendation votes. Monthly votes will increase by 900 updates at 1 p.m. Third update at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you to the leader of the alliance, Momo Moshi, for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Thank you to Yunhan Yuqin and Wenyan Chidian for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins each yesterday. Chapter 941. Are you sure they broke up? Ishihara Taro asked suspiciously. Absolutely. The person was very certain about this. Other than Miss Gu Yenran, there was another ally who didn't want to be named who confirmed this. Ishihara Taro knew that other than Gu Yenran, there was another powerful but low-profile ally who had helped the Ishihara Corporation. As for who this person was, it was said that even his grandfather, Ishihara Wakashi, wasn't sure. It was a pity that this person was very secretive and had never met them in person. They had always contacted each other through the phone. Now they couldn't even get through to him. Ishihara Taro no longer doubted this person when he heard it. Haha, she actually gave me a Ferrari as a Valentine's Day gift. No wonder she didn't care about me at all. Ishihara Taro looked up and thought about it silently for a while. He returned to his room and began to input these events into his formula. He first calculated the probability, then madly calculated and deduced all kinds of possible consequences. Gunyenji had just returned to her dorm when Ishihara Taro was so engrossed in his calculations that he forgot to eat and sleep. The last week of revision had ended, and the next week would be exam time. Machichi opened the door to see that Gunyenji had already returned with the breakfast she had bought and was scooping porridge for her. "Nyenji, my conch girl, let me marry you." Machichi, who had been starving all night, was so happy when she saw the table full of delicious breakfast. She rushed over to hug Nyenji and rubbed her cheeks. Gunyenji quickly pushed her away and smiled. "I bought all of this. I can't be a conch girl. You might as well marry a chef." Machichi made a face at her. "I was just saying. Don't take it seriously." Gunyenji laughed and scratched her face twice to embarrass her. "Hurry up and eat your breakfast. I even made coffee for you. Drink it quickly and prepare for your exams." Their first exam was that morning. Because Gunyenji was graduating early, she had to take twice as many exams as Machichi. Machichi only had 2 exams today, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Gunyenji had 4 exams today. 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon and 1 in the evening. Machichi knew that Gunyenji was busier than her, so she quickly waved her hand. Don't worry about me. Don't go back tonight, will you? Gunyenji shook her head with a smile. It's fine. I'll head straight back after the exam. Is it okay for you to live alone? Of course I'm fine. I'm only worried about you. Machichi turned to look at Gunyenji with a deep frown. You have so many exams and you still want to be a day student? It's just a test. Gunyenji shrugged. I really didn't take it to heart. Forget it, she was worried for nothing. Machichi snorted and turned her head to continue eating her breakfast and drinking her coffee. Gunyenji made a face at Machichi's back and walked to her room with a smile. She wasn't worried about this week's exams at all. She was only worried about whether her plan would succeed or not. As soon as the exams started today, the news of Gunyenji's early graduation would definitely spread throughout the entire faculty. The Japanese exchange student, Ishihara Taro, would definitely know about it. The exam bell rang and Gunyenji walked into the exam room confidently. She was not surprised to see Ishihara Taro sitting next to her. She looked straight ahead and sat down to prepare for the first introduction to law exam. Ishihara Taro actually didn't study much about law, but he had a good memory and could remember almost everything he saw. Therefore he made a last-minute effort to buy some notes and exam syllabus and memorized them all in one night. He came to participate in the exam today purely because he wanted to compete with Gunyenji. Gunyenji smiled as she sat in her seat and waited for the teacher to hand out the exam papers. Ishihara Taro twirled his pen. His handsome face was expressionless, and his entire body exuded a cold aura that warned strangers to stay away. This attracted the attention of many girls. Soon, the invigilator entered the exam room and handed out the exam papers. Gunyenji took out her pen and began to write quickly. She only used 45 minutes to finish all the questions. After checking once, Gunyenji handed in the exam paper. The invigilator was very surprised and asked, "Are you sure you don't want to check again?" Gunyenji shook her head and said softly, "I've already checked. I have another exam soon and must hand it in." "Oh." The invigilator glanced at her and put the exam paper away. "Then you can go." Gunyenji walked out of the exam room briskly and rushed to the second exam of the day. Ishihara Taro was not surprised that Gunyenji could hand in the exam paper early. He used to do this often, but handing in the exam paper early when there was still an hour and a half left was too arrogant. He looked in the direction that Gunyenji had disappeared and looked down to continue answering the questions. Time passed very quickly. It seemed like a day had passed in the blink of an eye. Gunyenji finished the fourth exam of the day and handed in the exam paper half an hour early. She walked out of the classroom at 8:30 p.m. and walked to the parking lot. Before she reached the parking lot, she met Ishihara Taro. He was smoking a cigarette by himself under a tree. When he saw Gunyenji walking over, he seemed a little surprised, but he wasn't particularly surprised. There was an indescribable complex emotion in his expression. "Classmate Gu." He called out to Gunyenji with a cigarette in his hand. Gunyenji stopped in her tracks and looked at him. "May I know who you are?" "Ishihara." Ishihara Taro walked over and looked at her in confusion. There were only 2 exams for the first year of the Master of Laws. Why did you take 4 exams? Gunyenji raised her eyebrows. How did you know how many exams I took? Are you so interested in other people's privacy? The exam schedule is posted on the bulletin board in the faculty office. Is that considered privacy? Ishihara Taro retorted sarcastically. I just had to take a look and I would know. Gunyenji was speechless. Fine, so what? Gunyenji pouted in disdain. What does it have to do with you how many exams I took? I was just asking. Ishihara Taro threw away the cigarette in his hand unhappily. Tell me if you want. Gunyenji turned around and left without saying a word. She knew that to some people the information she obtained herself was definitely more reliable. If she told him personally he wouldn't believe her. As expected, Ishihara Taro took it to heart. Looking at Gunyenji's disappearing silhouette, he took out his phone and called Gue Suyao. Ayao, are you free tonight? Gue Suyao was studying for a doctorate. Her final exams were all about writing papers and open book exams. However, she hadn't studied much recently. Even open book exams were a little difficult for her. But when she received Ishihara Taro's call, she nodded without hesitation. I'm free, Ishihara-kun. What's the matter? Of course. Ishihara Taro smiled. I'll pick you up? Gue Suyao happily agreed. She packed her books and got into Ishihara Taro's car. Ayao, that first-year student, Gunyenji, why does she have to take 4 exams? Ishihara Taro asked casually as he drove to his apartment. Gue Suyao was a little unhappy that Ishihara Taro mentioned other women in front of her. But because it was Gunyenji, she didn't say anything. She knew that Ishihara Taro wanted to deal with Gunyenji, so she told him everything she knew. I also only found out today. Turns out she wants to graduate early. That's why she has to take twice as many exams as a first-year student. What? Ishihara Taro slammed on the brakes. The luxury sports car screeched to a stop on the shoulder of the road. You said she wants to graduate early? What? Ishihara Taro was extremely nervous. Why did he only find out about such important news now? It's this semester. 1 week of exams and the weekend of oral defense. I only helped her pass the message today and told her that the last oral defense professor has already been confirmed. Gue Suyao thought about it. If she graduates and leaves, what will you do? Will you still have to deal with her? Ishihara Taro looked at her coldly and turned to drive back to B University. Hey, where are you going? Gue Suyao was very surprised. She turned to look at Ishihara Taro. What's wrong? Are you unhappy? Ishihara Taro shook his head. I just remembered that I still have something to do. I'll send you back first. I'll pick you up to see my grandfather after the exams. Gue Suyao was originally very unhappy because Ishihara Taro went back on his words. But when she heard that she would be meeting Ishihara Taro's grandfather after the exams and that he was his only relative, she immediately cheered up. This was the prelude to meeting his parents. Gue Suyao became bashful and said embarrassedly, "Isn't it a little too fast? Will your grandfather mind that I'm older than you?" Although Ishihara Taro didn't mind, it was impossible for Gue Suyao not to. You're thinking too much. My grandfather is a very reasonable person, Ishihara Taro said calmly. His expression was so cold that a layer of ice could have been scraped off. But Gue Suyao, who was immersed in the sudden happiness, couldn't feel it. She only felt that Ishihara Taro's personality was just right. He was aloof and she liked it. This time, Ishihara Taro sent Gue Suyao all the way to the dormitory of the female law students. This was also something that had never happened before. Gue Suyao increasingly believed that Ishihara Taro wanted to bring her to meet his parents and announce their relationship. The car stopped. Ishihara Taro didn't let Gue Suyao get out immediately. Instead, he pulled her and kissed her in the car reluctantly. The hood of the sports car was lower than the average car. It wasn't very comfortable for the two of them to kiss in the car. But Gue Suyao didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, she couldn't bear to part from him. Ishihara Taro looked at the watch on his wrist as he kissed Gue Suyao. 9:10 p.m. It was almost time. Ishihara Taro let go of Gue Suyao and kissed her face again. He smiled and said, "You can go in." Gue Suyao was reluctant and wanted to stay a little longer. But Ishihara Taro had already unbuckled her seatbelt. Let's go. We have plenty of time. Okay, Ishihara-kun. Gue Suyao was finally willing to get out of the car. She bent down and waved at Ishihara Taro in the car. She smiled sweetly and said, "Ishihara-kun, see you tomorrow." See you tomorrow. Ishihara Taro smiled slightly as he watched Gue Suyao walk into the dormitory. At this time, her best friend happened to return from the library. The two of them stood in the lobby of the dormitory building and chatted. They didn't enter the elevator immediately. At this time, most of the students were still studying. Only Gue Suyao and her friend were in the lobby downstairs. Ishihara Taro smiled coldly. Everything was going according to his plan. He would use Gue Suyao to practice his skills again. Only this classmate knew about his relationship with Gue Suyao the best. He couldn't guarantee that the blabbermouth Gue Suyao hadn't told this person about his plan to deal with Gunyenji. Ishihara Taro started the car with a cold expression and backed out. When he drove to the blind spot of the camera in front of the dormitory building, he quickly threw a gold coin out of the car. The car had just left when the manager of the dormitory building came back from the boiler room with a bottle of hot water. A ray of gold light flashed in front of her eyes. It was actually a gold coin. She stopped in her tracks and wanted to bend down to pick up the gold coin. In the darkness, she forgot that there was a foot-high cement flower bed beside her. The hot water bottle in her hand knocked against the flower bed. With a dull thud, the hot water bottle was smashed into pieces and the hot water inside spilled out. Because it was winter, the manager was wearing a lot of clothes. She didn't get scalded, but her hands were. She screamed in pain and couldn't care less about picking up the gold coin on the ground. She stretched out her scalded hands and ran to her room. Her room was on the first floor of the dormitory building. There was ointment for burns. When the manager rushed into her room, Gui Suyao and her classmate walked towards the elevator. Their conversation happened to last a perfect 15 minutes. It was exactly as Ishihara Taro had planned. "Where's my burn ointment? Where's my burn ointment?" The manager's hands were scalded. The pain made her anxious and she rushed to the place where she kept the ointment. The place was a small closet, and the main power switch of the dormitory building was right next to it. Although graduate students didn't need to pull the switch to turn off the lights at night, the dormitory building still had such a control system. This was because when it was originally designed, this building was probably also used as a dormitory for undergraduate students. The manager's hands were numb from the pain. It was very inconvenient and not nimble when she searched through the closet. In a panic, she shoved her hands into the closet and took everything out. Because her hands were injured, she couldn't control her strength and direction. She was already strong to begin with, so she almost tore the entire closet off and affected the main power switch next to it. The lights in the room flickered twice, and then the lights in the entire building went out. At this time, the elevator that Gui Suyao and her classmate took just reached the top floor at the 12th floor. The entire building suddenly lost power, and the elevator door wouldn't open no matter how hard they tried. How did this happen? "Open the door. Open the door." Gui Suyao and her classmate were so anxious that they pressed the up and down buttons in the elevator with all their might. They slapped the elevator door hard and even called the security office outside. At this time, the manager, whose hands were scalded, knew that she had pulled the wrong switch. She endured the pain and held the main switch with both hands and pushed it up. She used too much strength. The main switch that hadn't been used for a long time couldn't withstand her repeated pushing and pulling. Very soon, a few indigo sparks burst out and the circuit began to buzz. The lights in the entire building suddenly lit up, then went out again, lit up again and went out again. After this happened a few times, the building finally fell into complete darkness. The elevator that Gui Suyao and her classmate were in had malfunctioned due to a short circuit, and Gui Suyao and her classmate were pressing the buttons randomly. It was falling rapidly from a high place. Once the elevator went out of control, the consequences of the huge acceleration would be unimaginable. Gui Suyao and her classmate only had time to let out 2 shrill cries before they crashed heavily to the ground with the elevator. This chapter has 4,300 words. 2 chapters in one, including the monthly votes of 900 plus chapters. In the new month, the guaranteed monthly votes have dropped. Dear friends, you can vote now. There are also recommendation votes. There are no more at night. Chapter 942. The crash of the elevator was so loud that almost everyone in the building heard it. Everyone walked out of the dormitory with their phones lit up and looked at each other in the dark hallway. What happened? I think I heard a loud noise from the elevator. I heard it too. I thought it was an earthquake. Everyone chattered and raised their phones as they walked to the corridor where the elevator was located. There were originally 2 elevator doors side by side, but they were still closed. Because of the power outage, the elevator doors could not be opened. If everyone wanted to go downstairs, they could only take the stairs. The dormitory manager finally realized what had happened. She let out an earth-shattering scream and made a phone call in a flurry. She called the school security department, the off-campus police station, and even the elevator's warranty number. 5 minutes later, police sirens blared frantically as they drove in from outside the school. The people from the school security department had arrived long ago. The electrician fixed the main switch, but the elevator, it had fallen beyond recognition. Blood slowly flowed out from the bottom of the elevator and dyed the front of the elevator on the first floor dark red. There's someone in the elevator. No one knew who cried out first, but everyone suddenly screamed and ran in all directions. Almost all the students in the building ran out. Some didn't even put on their coats and were shivering in the cold winter night. Machichi had just returned from self-study and was shocked to see her classmates surrounding the front of the dormitory building. She went over to a girl on the same floor and asked, "What happened? Why did everyone run out? Was there a fire alarm?" No. The girl's face was full of fear. There was a problem with the circuit, and then the elevator broke down and fell from a high place. There were people inside. As she spoke, the girl couldn't take it anymore and found a place to vomit. Machichi's face turned pale when she heard that. She carried her backpack and took 2 steps back. There really was someone? Yeah, I heard it. I didn't dare go down to see. Another girl covered her nose and came over. Chichi, are you still going up? I don't dare to stay here anymore. I want to go home. It's okay. The elevator probably broke down. Just fix it. Ma Chichi was confused and tried to persuade the girl. Soon, the police arrived and pulled up a yellow line at the place where the elevator had fallen. There was only one working elevator in the entire building, and even the door of the other one was sealed. Everyone watched in the cold winter night for more than an hour before the malfunctioning elevator was cleaned up. The people inside were sent out in body bags. The students didn't see what happened, but they heard that one of the two girls in the elevator was their class counselor, Gui Suyao. Gui Suyao had been working as a counselor for first-year master's students this year, so she had a lot of contact with them. On Christmas Eve, she had just organized a Christmas party at Jinling Bar with the class committee. She didn't expect that she would be gone in less than half a month. Everyone felt a little uncomfortable. Finally able to go upstairs, the students all chose to take the stairs. Before the psychological trauma of the elevator accident dissipated, everyone probably wouldn't take the elevator again. Ma Chichi followed everyone back to her dorm room. Looking at the empty room, she suddenly felt a little scared. She took out her phone and fiddled with it for a while before calling Yin Shixiang. Chichi? It's so late. You're still up? Yin Shixiang had been suspended for a month and didn't have any visible work for the time being. He was preparing to go home and propose. He planned to take Ma Chichi to his hometown to meet his parents after her exams. Ma Chichi sat on the bed and hugged the blanket tightly. She said nervously, "Our building's elevator suddenly crashed today. I think there were 2 students inside. They probably died." Yin Shixiang froze and immediately stood up. "What did you say? Say it again." Ma Chichi felt bad and was a little impatient. She pouted and said, "Didn't you hear me clearly? I said that our building's elevator suddenly broke down today. Luckily I was studying in the library and not in the dorm. If I had been there." "Chichi." Yin Shixiang quickly interrupted her. "Don't talk nonsense." Ma Chichi finally smiled and felt better. Holding the phone to her face, she cocked her head and said, "You're worried about me." "Of course I'm worried about you." Yin Shixiang snorted. "Nonsense. Stay here and be safe." "Then can you not stay in the dorm anymore?" "What about Nianji? Was she scared?" Ma Chichi shook her head. Nianji was lucky. She went back to her apartment for the past 2 weeks. She wasn't scared. However, Yin Shixiang's words reminded her. Ma Chichi said, "I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm going to call Nianji and see if she's willing to let me stay for a few days." Yin Shixiang agreed and hung up. He was in disbelief. He walked around his room a few times and scratched his head. He called Hua Xiaoheng. At this time, Hua Xiaoheng was still working overtime in the office. The time around the Lunar New Year was always the busiest for the senior officials. The soldiers could look forward to the Lunar New Year holidays all year round, but the senior officials couldn't. The ones on duty at this time were the senior officials at all levels. Hua Xiaoheng was no exception. In the past 6 or 7 years, he had been on duty for almost every Lunar New Year except last year. This year he planned to stay on duty at the military base. The operator connected Yin Shixiang's call. He wore a Bluetooth headset and typed quickly on the computer as he asked, "Big Xiong? What's wrong? You're not happy with your suspension and want to work?" Yin Shixiang chuckled. "How could that be? Hua Xiao, I'm not going to talk nonsense with you. I have something to tell you." "What is it?" Hua Xiaoheng looked at his watch. It was 11:30 at night. Something at this hour was usually not a small matter. As expected, Yin Shixiang lowered his voice and whispered, "Hua Xiao, I just heard from Chichi that her dorm building's elevator suddenly broke down. There are 2 students in the elevator. They probably won't be able to survive." Hua Xiaoheng's hand paused for a moment, then he continued typing on the keyboard as if nothing had happened. "Okay. Is there anything else?" "Hua Xiao, you're not worried about Nianji at all?" Yin Shixiang almost screamed. "If you keep this up, you'll really not have a girlfriend. I'm telling you." Hua Xiaoheng's hand paused again before he calmly snuffed Yin Shixiang out. "If you keep talking to me like this, you'll not have a wife. I'm telling you." "Why?" "I'm going to propose soon." Yin Shixiang rolled up his sleeves proudly. "Even if you're my boss, you can't separate us." "Is that so?" Hua Xiaoheng laughed dryly. "I heard that the poorest outpost in the southwest corner of Africa is short of manpower. I'm considering who to send." Yin Shixiang was stunned for 2 seconds before he wailed and apologized to Hua Xiaoheng again. Hua Xiao, I was wrong. Please don't send me so far away to Africa. At least wait until after I get married." If he sent him to Africa right now, even if Ma Chichi didn't care, her parents would definitely object. They wouldn't let their daughter follow him to a remote place in Africa, and they wouldn't let their daughter live apart from her husband at such a young age. So Hua Xiaoheng wasn't exaggerating when he said he'd make him not have a wife. Hua Xiaoheng typed the last letter and turned off the computer. He calmly told Yin Shixiang to scram as far away as he could. As long as you know. Yin Shixiang understood that the alarm had been lifted. He chuckled. Hua Xiao, you really have the demeanor of a general. I just received Chi-Chi's call. My heart almost jumped out of my throat. Hua Xiaoheng's gaze froze for a moment. He stood up from behind his desk and calmly packed up the things on his desk and locked them up. He said, the fact that you called me so happily means that Nianji must be fine. Big Xiong, you really disappoint me. You're making me panic over such a small matter. Hua Xiao, you can't say that. This is human nature. Chi-Chi is special in my heart. Even if I know she's fine, I'll still worry. To be honest, when I think about how Chi-Chi was so scared at such a dangerous moment and how I couldn't be by her side, my heart feels like it's being scratched by a cat. I want nothing more than to fly over and hug her right now. Hua Xiaoheng felt Yin Shixiang's words were a bit harsh. He calmly interrupted him. You're suspended right now. You can visit Chi-Chi at any time. Why are you showing off your affection to me? You would have kicked me over a long time ago. I wanted to, but Chi-Chi said she's going to squeeze in with Nianji. You don't say you're so relaxed because you can sense it, right? Nianji is so lucky. She didn't even stay at school this week. She's been days studying at her apartment. She drives to and from school. She's having a great time. Yin Shixiang's words sounded even better than a song. However, Hua Xiaoheng's brows furrowed. She went back to her apartment? As he spoke, he switched his phone and found the Secret Service personnel protecting Gu Nianji by her side to call. Where are you? Hua Xiao? We're at Miss Gu's apartment. She's already gone back. Everything is normal. Hua Xiaoheng tightened his grip but didn't say anything else. He nodded. Okay, continue to observe. After hanging up, Hua Xiaoheng called Gu Nianji again. However, her phone showed that it was busy. At that moment, Ma Chi-Chi was calling Gu Nianji. Nianji, I'm begging you. Let me stay with you for a few days, okay? The final exams will be over in 4 days. Then I can go home. Ma Chi-Chi gripped her phone and stomped her feet in the dorm. Why do you want to stay with me? Gu Nianji hugged her iPad and leaned against the bed to yawn. Rubbing the corners of her eyes, she saw that it was almost midnight. She wanted to sleep. Nianji, you're lucky. You just don't know what horrible thing happened in our dorm today. Ma Chi-Chi vividly described the incident of the elevator falling from the 12th floor and said, I heard that there were 2 people inside. One of them was our counselor, Gui Suyao. Gu Nianji immediately sat up straight. Her voice trembled as she asked hoarsely, What did you say? The elevator really had an accident? Yes. Why would I lie to you? Just now, the police, ambulance, fire truck, and people from the school's security department all came. They surrounded us so tightly that we couldn't even squeeze through to see what was happening. Ma Chi-Chi waved her fist. Nianji, can I stay with you? I'm really scared. Gu Nianji was stunned for a long time before slowly shaking her head. Chi-Chi, I'm sorry. I can't for the next few days. You should stay in the dorm. It should be safer. Staying with her would only be more dangerous. This is the first update. It's a new month. Asking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Monthly votes and 1200 updates at 1 p.m. Third update at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you to Yunhan Yuqin for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Chapter 943. Ma Chi-Chi hadn't expected Gu Nianji to object, so she froze. She clutched her phone and sat tongue-tied on the bed, not knowing what to do. Gu Nianji didn't hear a sound from the other end of the phone, so she knew Ma Chi-Chi probably didn't believe she would object and was still in shock. But she really couldn't let Ma Chi-Chi stay with her now. She was probably the only one who knew that Ishihara Taro's real target was her, Gu Nianji. The elevator incident in the dormitory building was probably a hasty move by Ishihara Taro after he found out that she was going to graduate early. As for why Gui Suyao was in the elevator, Gu Nianji had her own thoughts. However, the most important thing now was to appease Ma Chi-Chi. Gu Nianji didn't want Ma Chi-Chi to misunderstand her. Ma Chi-Chi was her best friend. When she was trapped in Germany and had no one to turn to for help, only that silly girl Ma Chi-Chi did everything she could to help her. Gu Nianji composed herself and saw that it was Hua Xiaoheng's call. She didn't pick it up but continued to comfort Ma Chi-Chi. His voice was very gentle as he said, Chi-Chi, don't think too much about it. It's not that I don't want you to stay over, but I really have something to do here. The dormitory is actually safer. Wait for a few more days. After the exams are over, I'll pick you up to live here, okay? Ma Chi-Chi bit her lip. She wanted to beg Gu Nianji again, but when she heard Gu Nianji say that, it sounded like she really had a problem, so she couldn't bring herself to ask. In the end, he nodded and said softly, "All right, I understand. It's late, let's go to bed. Good night." Gu Nianji was silent for a moment. Good night. After hanging up, Ma Chi-Chi still felt uncomfortable. After this incident, she wasn't afraid anymore, but she didn't understand Gu Nianji's behavior. She played with her phone listlessly and dialed Yin Xixiang's number. "Brother Xiong, Nianji won't let me stay at her place." Ma Chi-Chi's voice was muffled and her nose was sniffling. She seemed to be crying. Yin Xixiang's heart, liver, spleen, lungs and kidneys hurt. He hurriedly said, "Chi-Chi, don't be afraid. How about I pick you up and let you stay at my house? I also have an apartment outside." Ma Chi-Chi snapped out of her daze and immediately objected, "That's not necessary, Brother Xiong. Maybe Nianji has some difficulties, but I'm fine. They would talk about it after the exam. Bye-bye." Ma Chi-Chi finally stopped. She hung up the phone and rolled over to sleep. Yin Xixiang became worried again and quickly called Hua Xiaoheng to complain. "Hua Xiao, what's wrong with Nianji? She wasn't that kind of person. Chi-Chi said she wanted to stay at her place for a few days, but she actually objected." Hua Xiaoheng saw that Gu Nianji's phone was busy, so he didn't call her again. He thought Gu Nianji would take Ma Chi-Chi to her apartment for a few days. After all, someone had just died in the elevator of the dormitory building. It was reasonable for the little girl to be afraid. She hadn't expected Gu Nianji to object to Ma Chi-Chi staying with her. This is too abnormal. When he thought about how Gu Nianji had suddenly abandoned the school dormitory and returned to her own apartment as a day student, Hua Xiaoheng clearly sensed that something was wrong. He couldn't sit still any longer. He hurriedly grabbed his coat from the hanger by the door, put it on, and left the house with his car keys. He didn't ask his orderly Fan Jian to drive. Instead, he personally drove to Gu Nianji's Hipingli apartments. Gu Nianji found out what had happened in the school elevator and couldn't fall asleep. She got up and went to the kitchen to warm some milk for herself. Just then her phone rang again. Gu Nianji picked it up and saw it was He Jichu. She swiped open the phone and answered it. "Professor He? So late. You're still awake?" He Jichu was wearing a Valentino Haute Couture gray camel cashmere half-length coat. He stood in front of Gu Nianji's dormitory building and called her. "Nianji, are you asleep? You didn't get a scare today, did you?" He had just learned that Gu Nianji's dormitory building's elevator had an accident, so he specially came to see her. Gu Nianji quickly shook her head. "I'm fine. Professor He, it's late. Aren't you resting?" He Jichu looked up in the direction of Gu Nianji's dormitory. "I'm downstairs. I'm worried. Turn on the lights and let me see." Gu Nianji was speechless. When she came back from Hua Xiaoheng's place, she said she wanted to return to her Hipingli apartment as a day student. He Jichu had objected at the time. However, Gu Nianji still agreed on the surface but opposed him on the inside. She secretly began studying on her own. She adapted very well this week. Even He Jichu didn't notice. But now she couldn't hide it anymore. Gu Nianji sighed softly and took a sip of warm milk from the microwave. She said calmly, "Professor He, I'm not in the dormitory." He Jichu was speechless for a long time. After a while, he finally said in a low voice, "Where are you?" "I'm in the Hipingli apartment," Gu Nianji said softly. Her voice was very gentle and slow. She was trying hard to appease He Jichu's anger. "Didn't I tell you not to go anywhere last time?" He Jichu raised his voice. His grip was so strong that he almost flattened the phone. Gu Nianji smiled and said gently, "Professor He, it's actually okay. You see, I returned to the Hipingli apartment just in time to avoid the dormitory building's elevator accident. I didn't make it in time and I wasn't scared. Isn't that perfect? Also," Gu Nianji paused and stirred the milk with a small silver spoon. She added some cranberries and oatmeal. "Also, I'm scared after what happened in the dormitory building. I don't dare to go back." This was a valid and logical reason. He Jichu rubbed his temples and finally took a step back. "That's fine. Then I'll pick you up tomorrow morning for the exam. I'll send you back after the exam. Anyway, I'll tie you to my side for the next few days." He Jichu didn't know why, but he also felt inexplicably uneasy. The elevator accident in Gu Nianji's dormitory building was clearly a coincidence. He had a feeling that Gu Nianji had escaped a disaster and couldn't get better. Gu Nianji was shocked when she heard He Jichu wanted to pick her up every day. She immediately refused. "Professor He, you don't have to pick me up. I'm very safe." "What's wrong with being very safe? You don't want me to pick you up because you're safe? There's only 4 or 5 days left anyway." He Jichu refused to give up. Gu Nianji panicked and used Hua Xiaoheng's name to stop He Jichu. "Professor He, you really don't have to. Actually, Hua Xiaoheng has other plans for me. If you interfere, I'm afraid Hua Xiaoheng." He Jichu was very insistent at first. However, when he heard Gu Nianji say Hua Xiaoheng had other plans, he hesitated and asked doubtfully, "Hua Xiaoheng really has other plans?" "Yes." Gu Nianji nodded vigorously. She knew that He Jichu would never confront Hua Xiaoheng, so she could use the time difference to her advantage. She would explain to He Jichu and Ma Qiqi once things were settled. However, Gu Nianji thought about what she had to do and didn't dare tell Ma Qiqi the truth. The kitchen was lit with a yellow ceiling light. The light was soft and silky, and the ivory cabinets were gentle and silent under the yellow light. She extended her hand and looked at her snow-white fingers. They were clean and without a single blemish. Although her hands were small, they had their own unique strength and energy. Gu Nianji clenched her fists. Her delicate face was expressionless. She was as cold as an ice sculpture, elegant and cold. "Professor He, did you know? The girl who died in the dormitory building's elevator today was our counselor, Gui Suyao. You're familiar with her, right? She was also your doctoral student." Gu Nianji changed the topic without batting an eyelid. He Jichu walked to his car and opened the door to get in. He drove to his professor's building. "Really? It was actually her?" He Jichu was also a bit surprised. Gu Nianji took a sip of milk and said, "Professor He, do you still remember the ball our class had at Jinling Bar on Christmas Eve?" He Jichu nodded. "Of course I remember. We were almost wiped out. Yes, I always felt that there was someone among my classmates who tipped off the mastermind. Otherwise, how could it be such a coincidence that we were chased by police cars as soon as we left the bar's parking lot?" He Jichu understood. "You mean that the person who tipped off the mastermind was Gui Suyao?" Gu Nianji nodded quietly. She was the most likely. That was the only way to explain why Ishihara Taro wanted to kill Gui Suyao. This could also be used in reverse. Why did Ishihara Taro want to kill Gui Suyao? Gui Suyao must have known something very unfavorable to Ishihara Taro. Then, other than the Christmas ball incident, Gu Nianji couldn't think of anything else that could have crossed paths with Gui Suyao. So from the looks of it, the incident of tying 2 bags of white powder under He Jichu's car was inextricably linked to Ishihara Taro. However, Gu Nianji didn't mention this. She couldn't let He Jichu and Hua Xiaoheng know who she was suspecting. If the two of them found out, her plan might not be able to proceed. He Jichu remembered what happened that night and didn't insist on picking her up. He only reminded her, "Listen to Hua Xiaoheng's arrangements and don't run around. Here, I think it won't be a problem for him to protect you." Gu Nianji tilted her head with a smile. "Professor, he doesn't have any prejudice against Hua Xiao?" He Jichu coughed. "I don't have any prejudice against him. As long as he's good to you, I won't reject him." Gu Nianji was so touched that her throat choked. She gulped down a few mouthfuls of warm milk to suppress her tears. She said softly, "Yes, thank you, Professor He. Good night." He Jichu also said good night to her before hanging up. Gu Nianji quietly finished her warm milk in the kitchen, washed the cup and walked to the bedroom. Just then she heard the door to the living room knock. Gu Nianji was speechless. She quickly turned off the lights in the room and picked up the baseball bat in the corner of the bedroom. She waited quietly by the wall behind the bedroom door. It was Hua Xiaoheng who opened the door. As soon as he opened the door, he immediately said, "Nianji, it's me. This is the 2nd chapter. Monthly votes of 1,200 plus chapters have been delivered. It's a new month. Asking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. 3rd chapter at 7 p.m. P.S. There's still a lot of content. I've already tried my best to speed up the progress, but there's still a lot I haven't written. It's been serialized for such a long time. Do you still like it?" You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.